Today's story begins with a beautiful girl who thought about straightening her wig to better hide her hair. She carefully applies false eyelashes and perfects them. Thus, our heroine became the guest, whom no one wants to see at the celebration. She, Miranda Vina, is going to completely ruin a wedding celebration today. Fruit Guild, a first-class guild that accepts secret orders and fulfills client requests. As the guild's trump card, she acts as a guest, pretending to be a lover, and returning goods. Although this job is not easy, the costume, makeup, and her acting skills have never let her down. And the current task is exactly in her line. Miranda, Lewis, the master of the Fruit Guild, turned to her. He had some business that would be ideal for her. And he asked her what she thought. Chewing chocolate, she asked with interest, and what kind of business was that? The young man asked her if she knew Duke Bentley Winter. The master explained that Duke Bentley Winter is the head of the authoritative solid ducal family. Power, money, appearance, everything about him is impeccable. But he is also known for not looking at women at all. But he heard that social circles had recently been alarmed by the news about the Duke's impending marriage. So she was very aware. But this time she will have to interrupt Duke Bentley Winter's wedding and at the same time tread on his reputation and ask him what he would say if the job was suitable for her. Miranda asked if they only accepted orders that had no harmful consequences. But Lewis said they would receive good coin. The girl gave her master a suspicious look. She already thought there would be some kind of intrigue. And she reminded him that she had missed something important. Miranda frowned and asked how much they had been promised for this order. Having grasped the thread of her employee's thoughts, Lewis replied 1 million gold. The next moment, the order was happily accepted, and the friends shook hands. Because no matter what it would be successfully completed. The girl told the coachman to wait for her, that she would be back soon and would pay 4 times more. That wife attracted the man, and he gladly accepted the conditions. Now Miranda had a chance to escape. Now she needs to get to the wedding palace, although it seems everything has already begun. She examined the room from the inside, which was to be expected from the wedding of a member of the solid family. The palace was simply huge. She heard there should be security at the post, but for some reason there was no one. And she also didn't see who was supposed to check the invitations. Everything was so simple that it even angered her. She had to dismiss useless thoughts. If she can complete this order, with the reward she can finally open her own cafe. And what did it matter who her opponent was? Whether it was the Duke or someone else, she would do all the work and immediately flee from here. For the sake of her dream, she will interrupt this wedding at any cost, and opening the doors of the ceremony hall. She shouted that this marriage cannot be celebrated. The people present in the hall began to scream, not understanding what kind of girl she was. The Duke's bride also asked the groom what was going on here, and if the gentleman knew this girl. And while the man was silently in a state of shock, Miranda fell to the floor. And crying, she said she was holding the Duke's son and thought she needed to cry more tragically now. She said that he left her and decided to marry another woman. She, complaining, asked how he could do this to her. People watched with interest what was happening. Miranda asked through tears if he had really forgotten that night. Passionate. The ladies admired such speeches while the Duke walked towards her. Everything was fine. She did her best to ruin this wedding, and now it's time to run. Wiping away her tears with a handkerchief. She said that he didn't even care how she and the baby would live now. But having stood up, she was about to run. But Duke Bentley Winter had already approached her. It was the first time the girl saw him so closely. He looked very cold-blooded and very handsome. Hey, he suddenly called the pink-haired girl. She was scared. People watched what was happening like in a movie when he, the Duke, grabbed her by the waist. He hugged Miranda and, smiling, asked Darling why she was so late. Holding a lock of her wig. Duke Winter said tenderly that he had been waiting for a long time. He especially emphasized this word, darling. The girl went cold. She didn't understand what he was talking about, how dear she was, how she was his. And in the sense of waiting for her and why, after all, they were meeting for the first time. The man licked his lips with a smile. His girl must have been very scared, and he told her not to even dare to run away. Miranda was terrified. And while she wondered why everything turned out this way, Duke Bentley easily took her in his arms and told her that now they had to leave. The girl no longer knew what to do or where to put herself. Her thoughts were so confused that they led her to be carried to the basement, and her hands began to tremble. While the Duke's bride screamed in horror at the gentleman to stop, she asked what was happening to her wedding. "Silence," said Duke Bentley Winter smilingly. "No need to scare your unborn son." Smiling, he turned to Miranda and cheerfully told her that there was no need to scare her baby either. The fruit worker flinched in fear. The child, the baby. The girl who was supposed to get married today froze in place from so much injustice. And an interrupted wedding. The green-eyed heroine understood that asking for $1,000,000 would not be easy. But no one told her that Bentley Winter was going crazy. Crossing his arms over his chest as they left the building, the Duke told his darling that he thought they had a lot to discuss. Then he suggested starting with a discussion about that hot night. Damn it, Miranda thought, mentally clutching her head. Looking away, she thought about what she should do. She could use a teleportation spell, since she could be caught at any moment. But now, right in front of her, is Bentley Winter Solid himself, the head of the Solid family. And the only lord of the magic tower in the country. In other words, he is the greatest sorcerer. And very competent in magic. If she is caught using magic, she will be expelled from the guild or something worse will happen, so she only has to wait for the right moment. When suddenly the man took the lady's chin and lifted it, asking her why she. His darling avoided eye contact with him. Wow, Miranda thought, looking fascinated at the man whose wedding she had just ruined. She thought about what this psychopath just said, and why he is so handsome that she couldn't even concentrate. Squinting, they looked each other directly in the eyes. She thought that now that look meant, "Don't even think about joking with me." She pressed her lips together. She had no other choice. Nothing would stop her. We'll see which of them laughs last, she thought. And apologizing, Miranda said she would like to talk in a quieter place. And she asked Darling how he saw it. Seducing the man, she pressed her hand against his cheek, and not just the actions. But also the words impressed Bentley so much that he shuddered. The green-eyed girl realized that now was the time, now was the moment. And starting to use magic, she shouted teleport. The next moment, a ray of light transported her to the Fruit Guild building. And she fell trembling, exhausted, to the floor. The girl lay unconscious on the floor, her mascara running down from her tears, her lipstick also smeared during the ceremony. And her wig had just fallen off. Louis tried to bring her to her senses. At the same time, the Duke looked surprised at his hand and the emptiness in front of him, and said out loud that he didn't think she would leave like that. A very interesting bride flew towards him. When suddenly the bride ran out of the ceremony hall, she said with resentment in her voice. And trembling, she called the gentleman and asked if he understood what he was doing. And where that girl was. The man turned sharply and said that she was gone. It seemed like something had happened. The bride said that it seemed to her that she didn't fully understand what was happening. When the Duke suddenly asked her in an angry tone if she thought she had the right to intimidate him. The lady flinched. She wanted to justify herself, but she couldn't cope with the cold and gloomy look of the Lord of the Magic Tower. In a trembling voice, she asked what he meant. Her hand was trembling, and the Duke said that at the Marquis's party, someone had put a love potion in his wine. How brave. That night, the girl frantically, with a frantic and hurried look, unbuttoned Lord Winter's shirt. And she shuddered, cursing. "Well, that's it," she exclaimed in disgust, "because I definitely added the prescribed amount of medicine." And she was trying to justify herself to the gentleman, who looked at her with disgust. Smiling, Bentley asked if that meant he had been too lenient with her that day. But he accepted the wedding. The lady screamed he accepted, the Duke explained. But marrying her is another story. Moreover, even if this girl hadn't appeared, Winter spoke coldly in her ear. He would only tolerate her until the ceremony. He advised her to better disappear before someone found out what she had done. The girl froze in horror in place. And while that lady remained intact, she was still furious. Lord Winter thought about how noisy it was there. And maybe he should meet his baby. When suddenly Miranda suddenly opened her green eyes, she heard the conversations. And just as quickly she got up. Louis asked her if she had woken up. "Oh, Louis." She greeted her friend in surprise and asked if she had returned successfully. The boy replied that yes, simply beautiful, and the mission was accomplished. The newspapers were already full of news about the dissolution of the Duke's engagement. The girl stretched and said that the most interesting thing she had was her pretty face, and asked what all the fuss was about. Lewis said that probably everyone was interested in the girl, who burst into the celebration, and not in the Duke, and he handed the newspaper to his friend. Laughing, the blonde said that they even put her on the front page. God, Miranda said they even managed to take a picture. She had read that Duke Bentley Winter was believed to have a son and a woman nicknamed Baby, whom he had diligently hidden and who had been the center of attention ever since. The article turned out great, said the brunette, so that's where they will end. But instantly, her eyes widened when she saw the next article, in which the Duke was looking for her, offering a reward. Humming a tune, Miranda walked cheerfully down the street at night and thought about how good she was. Why didn't she know before how pleasant the night could be? She believed that this was because she didn't have that amount of money before, because the key to optimism is a thick wallet. Money is the best deal. Miranda thought that this money would be enough for her to open a small cafe, and tomorrow she would go look for a place for her future business. And she wondered if nothing would happen. Thanks to her excellent performance, she successfully completed the assignment, for which she received a fabulous reward. And she certainly completed it. Only this madman hadn't ruined everything, and grabbing the bag of money, she wondered what he was doing. Looking for such a person. People should live a good life. From now on, she no longer accepts requests related to the wedding. It wasn't enough to run into someone else's hatred. Be that as it may, starting tomorrow the difficulties will end and a happy life will begin. And with these thoughts, she entered the house, cheerfully informing her father that she had returned. But instead of the usual interior, she saw completely broken dishes and a crying father sitting in the middle of the room. Miranda, what should I do? The man asked his daughter, telling her that his dad had committed a mortal sin. The girl flinched, and looking at the broken dishes behind her father, lowering her shoulders and head, she asked if he had really gambled again. 10 years ago, Miranda took her mother's hand and squeezed it through tears. Behind her were her grieving father, servant, and doctor. With her last strength, the woman smiled at her daughter and asked her to take it, extending the object with a trembling hand. She said that this music box would be with her in her place. She said she loved her and was very sorry. Alas! But with these words, this woman left the world. After her mother's death, her father became interested in gambling. She thought that after long wanderings, he would come to his senses. But then the hope in her did not fade, and she didn't even suspect that gambling would deprive her of all her property. Miranda angrily asked him if he was completely crazy. They barely managed to pay off all their debts. She asked him how much he owed this time. A bald man entered the house and said that this is what this worthless house costs. Here is a bald moneylender. The girl gritted her teeth and shouted indignantly and said, if he comes for money, she will accept it. No need to spit. The moneylender asked what that had to do with the matter. This house would be his anyway, what else? The girl shouted. She had to deduct the cost of the broken carriage and the amount she had borrowed. Said the bald man, thoughtfully and arrogantly, if she was so eager to protect her home that she paid off all her father's debts. He threatened Miranda if she didn't bring $1,000,000 gold tomorrow. He would kick her out of here. The girl fell to her knees in despair and clenched her fists tightly. Even though she had $1,000,000 gold, she had to solve the matter with money, no matter what it cost her. However, friend, this would repeat itself over and over again. Suddenly, another man entered the house and said that there was nothing worth anything in this house. Yes, it was destroyed, but he hoped it still belonged to the Baron. Miranda turned towards the front door and saw a dark-skinned brunette with brown eyes who asked her if she was the Baron's only daughter. Ivan. Kneeling in front of the Baroness, he smiled and said that she, by the way, was his type and that it was a shame they met as debtor and usurer. Oh, so you are a debtor. He mockingly recalled again and said that this means he is in an advantageous position. The girl grimaced. She, looking at the smiling expression on his face, thought that this man exuded danger. He said that a date could extend the return deadline. A date with a moneylender. Miranda asked disgustedly and abruptly stood up and said that under no circumstances. Never in life. Then the man took out the box his mother had given him before she died from his chest and asked her if this could change her mind. She was horrified. Reaching out for her thing, she asked the boy not to touch it. Saying that it was from her mother, the moneylender said kindly, then he would take it. He said that she could return this box if it was so dear to her, and the next moment. Angrily, the girl threw a bag of money at him and angrily told him to take everything. The dark-skinned moneylender easily caught the bag of money, smiled, and asked, "So you had money?" She said there was exactly 1 million gold pieces inside and demanded that he return the box. The boy said not to worry, he would take care of it until the interest was paid. Miranda looked angrily at her father. "Miranda, that is," said the guy, and as he left, he said his name was Wiener and smilingly asked her to remember this. The next moment, the door slammed shut. The man ran to his trembling daughter and complained that his stupid father had no honor, that he did not deserve her forgiveness. "Father," then a girl called the man, holding back tears and frowning. And she told him that this was the last time. She said if he sits at the table again, she will start shortening. "I understand," said the man. Trembling and crying, "This will never happen again." Giving the man a stern and murderous look, she said that the truth would begin. The man nodded fearfully. The girl looked out the window and thought, pay again. How much longer should I keep doing this? How much should I try? Darling, come back to me. Your place is here, by my side. It seemed written in the newspapers. Now she wanted to be not that rich duke's girl, but herself, the real one. But now, a few days later, Miranda is again sitting in the image of the same girl who interrupted the wedding. Not understanding what is happening. "Darling," Duke Winter turned to her and kissed her hand tenderly. And then, looking up, he suggested, "Let's get married." What did he just say? The girl looked at him in horror and thought, he is proposing marriage to the man who ruined her wedding. And she is seeing him for the second time in her life. The day after the engagement ended, in the Fruit Guild office, Miranda complained about her headache. Louis, drinking coffee, asked the worker what happened. Why was she half dead since the morning? "Hangover." She replied she drank a couple more glasses at home. Smiling, the boy replied that he would have done the same. Alcohol became so tasty as soon as 1 million gold appeared. "Yes, sure," the morally dying girl replied, sighing deeply. Everything swam before her eyes, and there were huge bruises under them. But that money was already gone. Louis almost choked on his coffee and, paralyzed by shock, asked her what she was saying. They were gone, the cup fell from his hands and broke on the floor. "But I knew it," said Miranda, "but they are no longer here. They all disappeared." This really puzzled the boy, and he arched an eyebrow and looked at her. "I keep thinking." Louis suddenly asked Miranda uncertainly where all her money goes all the time. He said that he specifically gives her profitable orders. But no matter how you look at it, she is ruined. She doesn't buy clothes. She doesn't use cosmetics. But she has a cart and a nice house. These words hit right in the heart. Yes, Louis suddenly guessed and asked her if she spent everything on food. With a start, the girl asked what would happen if she didn't. "Well," said the guy, "you decide how to manage your money." He has no right to interrogate her. Miranda sighed. If something happens, he is willing to listen to her, but still eating well is the most important thing. Spending money on food is not a sin at all, she said. When someone knocked on the door creaked, and Louis's secretary, Patrick, appeared in the doorway, greeting the gentleman. He cheerfully said that he had brought a hangover remedy, just as she had asked. And seeing the girl's condition, he realized it was for Mrs. Miranda. Louis thanked Patrick and asked if he had anything to do. The guy said no for today, after which Louis looked at the employee. And resting his elbows on the back of the sofa, the boy told Miranda that guests would arrive soon. And he asked if she could go out for a minute with Patrick. Both guild workers were surprised by the proposal, and Louis said he was walking, that she was sober and could return. Looking at her boss with disgust, arching her eyebrows, she asked him if he thought it was that easy, and if she should do it, and she had no money. As a result, Louis gave the money to Patrick and sent them out onto the street. Miranda even ate too much at the establishment they went to and praised it. But Miss Miranda, the boy suddenly asked her if she was hot. She was sweating profusely. The girl said she was sweating on purpose so that the alcohol would evaporate. Now that she felt alive, Patrick also noticed that he felt better. But the Baroness admitted that she probably felt worse because of hunger. She walked a little, and her mood improved. But in a moment, she turned and said that the guests would return soon, and it was time for them to work. And so the workers of the Fruit Guild approached their workplace, looking with surprise at the luxurious carriage nearby. Taking off the hood of her cloak, she looked around and thought that some aristocrat had arrived. She couldn't believe whom she saw in front of her, the incredibly amazing and sexy Bentley Winter. But why did they forget him here? The girl ran into the room with Patrick and throwing the door open. She loudly told Louis that it was a Bentley Winter. Indignant and shocked, she asked what they should do. He found out that they decided to ruin his wedding. She had to flee urgently. When Louis said that he was not here for that, the Duke himself came to give them a task. Apparently, he had heard good rumors. The girl asked what kind of order it was. The smiling boy said that he asked to find the pink-haired girl who interrupted the celebration. And he asked if that wasn't the ideal order. After all, they already know who this criminal is. Miranda laughed nervously and said that of course they know. She wondered if he understood that this was not a task that should be accepted out of the blue. Isn't the Duke a powerful and terrifying mage, a joke to him? By the way, Louis suddenly said, he promised a higher reward than the previous one. We'll take it. Maz, the girl immediately said, clutching her head in despair. The boy knelt down to be at the same level as her and told her not to worry so much. And he asked her if he had ever entrusted her with a dangerous job. But she seemed to remember something like that. Louis said that the meeting place would be the reception hall of his guild. If something goes wrong, she can call him immediately. The next moment, he put his hand on her shoulder and told Miranda to relax. Patrick said that his master was good at fencing. The girl thought that after completing this mission, she could settle her father's debts once and for all. And she could still return her mother's music box. Well, there's nothing to do, she thought and said okay. She will take on this case. Who knows, maybe this way she will finally get rid of this psychopath. If she doesn't have the opportunity to escape, then she will force herself to escape. And with these thoughts, she opened the door and greeted the Duke. Duke Bentley Winter had been waiting for the girl for some time. He crossed his arms over his chest and opening his eyes told her to sit down. The girl swallowed. He was too calm. But after this encounter, he ran as if scalded and tore his hair out when he saw the pink curls. Miranda said she didn't expect him to be first. But how else? The gentleman asked. He was madly looking forward to the day when he could meet his beloved baby again. Duke Winter asked smilingly. She was so surprised that she almost choked. She thought she needed to compose herself. It was starting to look like a duel. There is a cliff around them. They cannot retreat. This is an instant defeat. The first round, may the strongest win. But the best defense is attack, and she asked, which means the gentleman missed her very much. And he still couldn't forget that hot night. How could she even forget such an event? The violet-eyed boy repelled the attack with a smile. He would like to hear from his baby's lips what happened that night. Do you think she will be scared? Miranda thought. And she said that they spent it so hot that the next morning she had no voice. Then her body ached terribly. She didn't think she could ever forget it. The boy listened to her smile. But contrary to expectations, he was not suddenly preparing to get married. She asked, this man definitely forgot everything that happened between them, she thought then. But he remembered everything. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes and she asked how, as if nothing had happened. They were going to marry another woman, and now he approached her with the words, I was looking for myself. Friend stood up from the chair and hit the table with his hand and said that he didn't even apologize to her. Neither shame nor conscience. The Duke stared at the girl, who mockingly asked why he looked so gloomy. It was really unpleasant to hear all this. A special rejection tactic worked. She thought that this bastard would sooner or later fly out of this room. And he would keep talking about feelings. It was like a duel, where she, waving her sword and making her move, said that he certainly must take responsibility for the damage caused to her soul. What will Bentley Winter say? The girl who ruined his wedding in the stupidest way demands that he take responsibility. Yes, it's clear that she has gone crazy, the Duke said smilingly. So that's exactly what his baby wants. So she ran away too soon. He apologized for not having prepared the ring yet and kissed her wrist. Darling, he turned to Miranda and proposed marriage, tenderly kissing the fingers of her hand. The pink-wigged Baroness looked at the man in surprise and asked what kind of wedding this was. The boy asked her if she didn't want him to take charge. But at least he knows her name. Where has it been seen that he would propose marriage without knowing the name? He replied that marriage was the last resort. Looking down, he said that this was the most effective way to find her. The day after the night together, she disappeared. The place of their first meeting was a banquet, and when their eyes met, he could recognize her without words. They were born to meet. During the conversations, the smile did not leave their faces. He had really met a person who suited him so well. Duke Bentley said he was ready to dedicate his life to her. Wait, what are you talking about? Asked Miranda. The boy said, darling, about that same day. It turns out the girl thought that he is referring to a fictional story, but why is it so true? However, in the morning, when she opened her eyes, his baby, had already disappeared. He looked for her everywhere, like a madman. Miranda murmured quietly that it seems he is still like that. He asked the baby what she was saying. She replied, thinking out loud. He firmly believed that she would come to the celebration, and he was clearly not mistaken. Because now that she was sitting in front of him, she thought it seemed like he wasn't lying at all. Touching his fingers, she thought that she perfectly understood that they were just fictions. But for Bentley, everything might not be so. Sir, she turned to the Duke. She would like to ask him if it is possible that his beloved is not her, but another pink-haired girl. After all, if he really made a mistake, then everything is much simpler than she thought. The Duke laughed and asked her why she thought so. She said that his story was different from what she remembered. He must love that person so much that he is willing to do anything to win love. But he really made a mistake and proposed marriage to another. The girl asked him what he would say about it. Duke Winter, smiling, said that he understood the reason for her enthusiasm, that she had always been very popular. However, he met her. She is his only beloved, he said, stroking her cheek. The boy told Miranda that her worries were in vain. She thought that this could not happen. What a relief. This man, damn it, no matter how hard I stab him. He still doesn't move, successfully deflecting every blow. Maybe now everything will become clear. The lie will be exposed, she thought. Now it is impossible to do without monetary compensation. Sitting alone with her, he longs for the warmth of that day, he told her, looking directly into her eyes. That's right, Miranda thought. Bentley Winter took advantage of the opportunity, just as she had done before. If this method works, the Baroness thought, the man's eyes instantly opened when the girl kissed his fingers. Well, he asked smilingly. The feeling of melancholy no longer bothers her so much. The boy was extremely surprised. She pulled the Duke towards her by the shirt, smiling and hugging him by the shoulders, and asked him if he was still sure that he was in love with her. What? He was confused, the Baroness thought mockingly. He has nothing to say, so let's continue in the same spirit. But the next moment, Bentley said fascinatedly that his beloved had initiated it herself, and he asked her to remember it. She felt like a sword extended against her throat, but at the same time tender and warm when he approached and kissed her on the lips. Miranda tried to escape. With a flushed face, leaning on the lady, he threw her onto the sofa and pressed one hand near her head. He really kissed her, but well, the girl thought. No, he just does it very well. With a trembling but free hand, she grabbed him by the neck. It was a total failure of Miranda, this feeling, said Bentley. It was exactly what she thought, just like his baby. Well, asked Count Winter, wiping his lips and smiling, saying that he thinks this is enough to be sure. No, the girl suddenly said, just a little more, and with these words she hugged the young man by the neck and pulled him towards her. But then she realized that she had made a terrible mistake, but that kiss was too good. And getting up, she wanted to justify herself. when suddenly Miranda heard a laugh escape from the Duke's mouth. She tried so hard to contain it that she even trembled. And embarrassed, he looked away. The Baroness's feeling of shame was at its peak. Her face turned red, and she asked if he was laughing at her. Laughing, the young man said not at all, just that he has a very cute face when he expects a kiss. The girl turned her head in embarrassment and asked him if he couldn't wait for it. They could repeat what they had already done. In fact, Bentley replied smilingly. Yes, it was all for this kiss, Miranda thought. It just takes her head off. She is about to lose face. Baby. The Duke then asked what they should call their baby and where they would go on a trip. And while she wondered if he wanted to ask her name first, she asked him to stop. But she kept getting hit. And when he suggested repeating that kiss somewhere picturesque, she seemed to fall off a cliff, suffering defeat. At the same time, he reached out and told her that now he could give his girl whatever she wanted. And he asked her what she thought. One moment, Miranda asked him to tell her that he could give her whatever she wanted. Darling, he turned to her and asked if it seemed like there was something he couldn't afford. She thought that he was saying the right words to such an extent that it was exasperating. But the Duke kept asking about character, face, and maybe sex. He told his beloved that he was self-confident and that she knew better than anyone what it was about. Mentally looking, he asked not to read her thoughts and looked at the area of her groin. Whether it was a kiss or a passionate night, he said he would fulfill any wish of his baby. The sword fight with this man was shamefully lost in a moment, she thought. But that means that he, the boy, promises to give her everything. A passionate night, kisses. She believes that this is what she wants. But the real reason she is here is money. She asked him if he could give her money if she wanted it. Money, the young man thought thoughtfully, look. She thought that maybe it wasn't worth asking for such a thing. But if she angers him, then it will be the best. The Duke certainly said, she doesn't even know how much money he has, and from now on her body. Her feelings and her fortune belong to her. Miranda chuckled and thought, well, I guess it's worth trying once if he doesn't realize that she is from the Aben family. Then all the problems of her life will be solved. In a new house with her father, the dream of opening a cafe will come true, the opportunity to eat meat every day. It was an ideal marriage. She thought she had absolutely nothing to lose. He literally put victory in her hands. When Bentley said that this was the end of their meeting and that he had to go and ask what his beloved's answer was, Myra shuddered and said she needed to think. Well, since she needs to think, said the Duke. He gives her 15 days, no more. He is not a very patient person. The girl got up behind him and, asking him to wait, asked if their next meeting would be here. He said he didn't know if there was a better place to meet. He was going to buy her a precious ring and asked her to think carefully about his proposal. He left the room. After a while, Miranda entered and smiling told him he had done a great job. But the next moment, she saw her worker walking in circles around the room and murmuring something restlessly in a low voice. Approaching her, Louis asked what happened to her. Something happened. Miranda, worried, said she needed to fix something. Calm down, Louis asked her what she had done and why she was running around so much, when suddenly he saw abrasions on her arm. Suddenly he grabbed the girl's hand and, worried and angry, asked her what those marks were. What he had done to her, he hit her. Miranda said none of that happened and asked him to calm down. The Duke simply proposed marriage to her. The boy was paralyzed in stupor. The girl said he promised to give her money, and in any case, she didn't think it was a bad offer for her, so that he could profit from her. Bentley Winter said she was the only girl he had with pink hair. But the risk was too great to trust her word, he thought. But somehow he was able to find her, which means she must become exactly the woman he was looking for. Removing her false eyelashes, she told Louis she had to go, that there were many things to do. And she asked when the payment for this order would arrive. It should come in 4 days, said the guild master. I understood, said Myra cheerfully, removing her wig and saying they would see each other then. The next moment, the inspired girl closed the door behind her, leaving the boy alone in the city, who couldn't believe that Betty had proposed marriage to Miranda. A few weeks ago at night, Louis came to the bar and asked her to serve him as usual, but to bring 2 glasses and for the second person. Running his finger along the rim of the glass, he was waiting for a guest, when suddenly a man's voice apologizing for being so late was heard. Lewis turned and smiled at his friend, Duke Bentley, and greeted him as if he were a neighbor. Sitting next to Winter, he asked him if he had ordered everything in advance. Lewis replied that he drinks the same thing every day. For some time, the boys discussed the passing of days and Lewis's business. When Bentley asked him if he could receive an order from him, Lewis, surprised and interested, asked his friend what kind of order it was. And Bentley asked to interrupt the wedding. The yellow-eyed boy said they were not going to spoil other people's important events. This is no longer the case. Betty, indignant, asked why he came up with the idea that it was about someone else's wedding, and explained that he was talking about his own wedding. Surprised, Lewis spat out alcohol and asked him if he was really getting married and immediately congratulated him. The guild master said he thought he liked him, and all this time pretended not to understand anything. "What are you talking about?" asked the Duke, and the fox asked. Then why were there rumors that his ideal type was a handsome blonde who looked like a puppy? And besides, they drink with such excitement every night that Bentley asked him if he was tired of living. Lewis apologized and asked him if he knew who he was marrying. "You still don't understand?" asked Winter. "This is the reason why this woman gave him a love potion." His friend said that a public execution was too cruel an idea. "It's not like that," said the silver-haired boy, and asked to be allowed to explain everything. "You can't win a human heart like that, and it will help silence many, like those people from the Senate who always harass him with talk of marriage. And it's time to deal with those rumors about his type, so that people with their delusions don't show up." "It's a pity," said Lewis. He would be very happy if Bentley Winter finally found a partner. "That won't happen," he replied. "It's time for him to give up." "All right," said his friend Blonde, who looked like a puppy, and after drinking a glass, he asked that all fruit guilds provide it to him. And the owner of the establishment, smiling and blushing, said that the price would be a little high. Where had it been seen that the reputation of such an important person would be ruined without paying? And they have a guild member who is perfect for this task. She always leaves visitors satisfied, like their trump card. Clean and precise work requires additional payment. So Lewis asked. The Duke exhaled mockingly and asked him how much he wanted, for which they signed the contract. And while the boy was thinking about this, Patrick asked what was wrong with his master. "He has been distracted lately, but he's fine," replied Lewis. "I thought he had proposed marriage to Miranda, but that wasn't mentioned in the contract." And then the secretary handed him a pile of papers. Winter had just arrived at his estate when the shouts had already fallen upon him. The boy explained that he was at the Lewis Guild and asked if he had to inform him of everything every time. "Of course," said Jennifer, shouting indignantly that she was his assistant. She didn't need to adjust his schedule. Bentley said that now she looks like a grumpy wife, but no. Soon he will have a real wife, and chuckled. Jennifer didn't understand what her master was talking about. She asked what a real wife was like. Winter said he proposed marriage to her. The girl was dumbfounded. The man said he needed to get married, while the Senate wasn't too alarmed. And he had decided on his future wife. The girl remained indignant about how he made such a decision. Without saying a word to him, she asked if it was about the same girl and said he was completely crazy. Then the Duke, placing his hand on the slot, calmly turned to Jennifer and asked her if her opinion on the wedding was that important. She said she wouldn't mind if he were sincere with her, but finding brides was also part of her duties. It hurt her feelings, and the Duke compared them to a wolf and a trembling rabbit. He said he knows what she thinks of him, so he will marry whomever he wants. Duke Winter asked her if she had obtained information about this girl. She looked away sadly and handed him the documents. This girl was Miranda Avina, daughter of Baron Vina in recent years. The family's situation had deteriorated significantly due to the debts the Baron incurred through gambling. Miranda Avina said thoughtfully, recalling the girl's request to give her money. So it was. Realizing what his fiancée needed, he called his assistant Jennifer, who abused his ear. And without taking his eyes off the photograph attached to the documents, he asked her if she could prepare the documents for his baby. She thought she needed a lot of money. That same evening, when Miranda returned home, she asked her father what it was. Meat and a tortilla, looking at the food. Why? She asked. There had always been only vegetables, and, by the way, she also liked quinoa. The father said he had collected the remaining money. The man said he was glad to see his daughter eating well and apologized to her. He said that if he hadn't fallen for that woman's bait, he would have cooked her delicious food every day. His daughter asked him who he was talking about. The man realized he had let it slip and said everything was wrong. He had made a mistake. To begin with, Miranda chewed the tortilla and swallowed it. And she told her father she would only be happy if he could find a new love for himself. It has been 10 years since my mother passed away. This is his life. She asked him not to obsess over her, but to live as he wanted. But not to get involved in gambling. The man told his daughter not to worry. After an argument about his addiction, the Baron took out an envelope and told Miranda to see that he had received an invitation. The girl was surprised to ask whose. The father said that was an invitation to a banquet from the Barbarossa family. And that it would be in a week, he would buy her a dress so she could go there. Miranda said she didn't want to go there. What are you talking about? Asked the Baron and reminded her whose daughter she was, and she doesn't go to parties at all. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she said it was his fault for not treating her properly. What did he regret? He begged his only daughter in tears. Realizing this wouldn't stop, Miranda said, "Okay, I'll go." The girl thought, since the banquet is in a week, then Bentley Winter is more likely to be there. Even if he worries in vain, he won't know about her. Myra exhaled heavily and said that buying is like hunting. If you don't have time, look for the next target. Here is my baby, said Bentley. She is a true professional. He suggested they have lunch after the house. He had booked all the restaurants for today, so she could choose any. A brave and courageous man who does not fear the price of armor, as expected of the man who chose her. He said while having dinner. The boy asked if his baby had enough in her belly. She could order more, but Myra asked him if she could finish it with dessert. That's a good idea, dear, said Duke Bentley, but his son doesn't exist, and he asked why she always says he exists. The girl felt cold, and the next moment her eyes darkened, and she abruptly got out of bed. She opened her eyes and realized it was a dream. After meeting Bentley Winter, she frantically searches for information about the pink-haired girl. But it was all in vain. Nightmares even started occurring. With these thoughts, she approached her boss and asked what he thought about it. But Louis categorically forbade it. The boy asked Miranda if she really wanted to accept the proposal. She replied that she hadn't decided yet, but if everything went well, she would have a lot of money. The guild leader leaned his head back and said he understood her feelings. But still, this was not the best idea. Firstly, it is too dangerous, but the girl said she was ready from the beginning. The boy said he wasn't referring to her, but to the reputation of the guild. She said they had already found the person he was looking for, but what should she do when she comes? And say this. That's right, replied the Baroness. The young man said that even if someone showed up, it would be this very lady. But most importantly, he fixed his gaze on the employee and asked if she had money for the expense commission. She was surprised that she also had to pay. But suddenly, Louis said that enough talking for today. He asked her not to worry, that if she had a profitable order, he would give it to her immediately. She thought he was right, there was no point in risking the organization. She needed to continue the search alone, just to get accurate information. Suddenly, Louis looked at the envelope with interest and said thoughtfully that an invitation from a national clandestine organization had arrived. But then the Baroness abruptly turned to her boss and realized there was still a way. A banquet, a gossip spot, just a gold mine for a spy. And so, a few days later, she was already standing in the banquet hall of the Barbaros family. And listening to the conversations, she realized that everyone was talking about the interrupted wedding. And about the pink-haired girl. This was to be expected, but there were no people who saw everything live, she thought while looking at the people around her. If she wastes time this time, problems will arise and she will have to get out with the help of her acting. Long time no see, Mrs. Miranda. Suddenly a man's voice came from behind. And the girl turned around. In front of her, she saw a boy with shoulder-length hair. He thanked her for accepting his invitation. It was the son of the Barbaros family, Neville. Bowing, he greeted and said he was grateful to have been invited, when the boy offered to speak in private. The young man said that he was actually still waiting for the opportunity to tell her his most sincere feelings. "You were really going to flirt with her?" asked Miranda, placing her hand on his shoulder. He said it was absolutely true. She asked him why he would do that. Neville asked if there was any reason for this. He just wanted to take care of her. The girl asked to listen to him because they barely knew each other. The son of the Barbaroja family exhaled deeply and asked her why she was so meticulous. She acted expensive and didn't have a penny in her pocket and asked him what he was saying. He whispered in the lady's ear that he couldn't afford anything other than this cheap dress, and that she should be happy about the attention. And he himself didn't know how to control his body. Miranda was surprised at first and then became very angry. She was very upset by what he said about her father's gift, although she couldn't give him more. But it was all she had. The next moment, she grabbed the boy by the shirt, looked at him angrily and asked if he had completely lost his fear. Extending his hands, he asked what Mrs. Miranda was doing, because he only said it out of bright feelings. Raising her head proudly, she cunningly said that love for him shines in her heart, and that nothing can be done about it. When suddenly a strange hand rested on the boy's shoulder, and this voice said coldly, "I am a very jealous person." Myra's eyes widened. A man's voice asked in Neville's ear, who shuddered, what he was doing with the girl he was proposing to marry. She thought that couldn't be. It was impossible that he couldn't recognize her, but the next moment the boy fixed his gaze on her and greeted her dear with a smile. The next moment she gasped. The people nearby were also in shock that the alcohol drunk returned to the glass. He abruptly pushed away the boy clinging to his lady and said enthusiastically that these emotions only made her beautiful. She covered her mouth with her hand. She said anxiously that she didn't understand what he meant. It seemed like he had made a mistake. However, he asked the girl who sat on the floor and approached her by sitting on her lap. Whispering in her ear, he said smilingly that she was the daughter of Baron Avina, as well as the trump card of the Fruit Guild. And he asked her if this did not apply to her, Mrs. Miranda Avina. "But how?" asked the girl. The boy replied that it was not that difficult. She could find out whatever she wanted. She was surprised by the answer. "Darling, you have done a lot," said Duke Bentley Winter with a smile. "And you have been a guest and a recovery agent, even leading a secret investigation." It's all over, she thought. He said he would come in 15 days. She could pretend she didn't know. He was about to leave again. What should she do? How to survive? In a whisper, he asked what he should do with her, and then walked away. Almond clutched the skirt of the dress and apologized. This time, she was only fulfilling an order. Her money seemed so nice that she decided to trick him. She admitted. And lowering her head, she informed the Duke that she was not the one he was looking for. As she stood up, she said that he asked what he should do with her because he thought she was going to run away. "She is right-wing, just unpredictable," said Bentley kindly and tenderly with bright eyes. The boy said he needed to tell her something and, smiling, held out his hand and asked if she could accompany him for a minute. They went to another part of the building, where Jennifer led the gentleman to the correct room. He thanked the assistant. The girl followed him to the room and stopped without going further in. Then Bentley asked his dear why she was stuck in place. He smiled and said there was no need to be afraid. And with these words, lightning flashed and thunder roared. It's true, she thought. She said she was very sorry and sincerely apologized for trying to extract him, undermining his reputation and honor. She said it would be difficult for her to pay compensation and asked about another way. "This means," said Winter, that he was thinking about how to amend the situation and, on this matter, he asked her to give her consent to the proposal he made to her. Miranda asked him if he was sure about proposing marriage to a man who ruined the wedding and made money from it. And he isn't even angry. Of course he knew. But on the contrary, she seemed like a savior to him, and to be precise, he was proposing an unusual marriage. The next moment, the young man pulled a sheet of paper from his jacket and said it was a marriage contract for 1 year. The girl approached, read the text, and asked about the marriage contract, frowning, and asked why he was offering her this. He replied that, since many people were trying to force him to marry against his will, if she hadn't interrupted his wedding, he would have remained married to the one he didn't want to see. Moreover, her family is in debt, and he is rich. The Duke asked her if she understood what he meant. Myra said that if they got married, he would be free from marriage pressure, and she would be free from debt. The guy said that, in general, he had prepared another contract and admitted that he hadn't said it before, but that he had lost something. He lost fame, trust, reputation, and there were also rumors about his love affairs. A wound left in his heart, betrayal, anxiety grew. He pulled another sheet of paper from under his jacket, but this time it was black. His eyes looked crazy, and he said he had spoken to his lawyer, and it seemed he should demand $1 billion gold from her. This little one, she thought, came here with a specific purpose, and from the beginning he was not going to give her another option. She happily said that marriage was simply the most wonderful proposal, but that the contract required careful reading, and she looked away. He went to meet her. It was creepy and asked if she knew how long he had been waiting for her answer. The girl thought only 3 weeks had passed. That's right. Miranda thought a teleportation spell. But then Bentley said that if he thought he would let her use it, he would cast a sealing spell on the entire room. Snapping his fingers, he smiled and said that today he would definitely hear her answer. And he would use magic. The guy said he would even dip his finger in the paint, of course. It was she who decided which of the contracts to seal. Winter said, either a slavery contract with damages of $1 billion gold pieces. She looked around uneasily. Or she will choose a 1-year contract that guarantees her extremely pleasant income. She just needs to extend her finger to the one she likes best. He asked Miranda what she would do. The girl said she understood everything and shouted to him that she would do it. She would marry him. While eating, he asked her if she liked it too. She said she hadn't even read the entire contract. The young man said he was sure it didn't contain any disadvantageous provisions. And he offered to read it. And smiling, he said that it turns out that starting tomorrow she will be married. Miranda laughed. She asked what the story of the pink-haired girl was. He said that her acting was so realistic that he took that motive. She should be a writer, he said. The young man thanked her for the compliments. As then, the girl looked exactly into her fiancé's eyes and asked why it was her. Looking out the window, Bentley said it was because he thought she could bear it. And he believed that she would not give him a love potion because of his strong love. Who knows? Said the Duke sadly, looking down and tilting his head to the side. Miranda looked surprised at the young man in front of her and soon turned her gaze back out the window, looking at the city night lit by lanterns, which was pouring rain. The girl said there are enough abnormal people in this world. That's exactly what the boy said. As for me, said the young Duke, you are not entirely normal either. The Baroness wondered if she would look in the mirror, when suddenly she started looking for something in her pockets. She said she had almost forgotten, and opening a beautiful box, inside which was a ring. She said she had prepared something for her. Miranda Avina turned to her fiancé and asked him to treat her well during this year. He took her hand, put a ring on her ring finger, and asked her to marry him. Upon arrival, Myra asked him if he had taken her to such a remote place on purpose. And she thanked Bentley, asked him what those hidden notes of aggression were. The girl laughed. By the way, she asked, when the ceremony takes place, he asked her how she would react if he told her tomorrow. You're kidding, she asked, and laughing at the expression on the face she imagined. He said he would leave now. Yes, said the Baroness, and after observing him, she directed her attention to his wet shoulder and examined her dress. She wasn't wet at all and wondered if he had tilted the umbrella on purpose. What kind of person was he? He was very strange, she said out loud. At the same time, at the banquet, Neville thought that all his efforts had gone down the drain. Looking at Vina, because she was Bentley Winter's mistress. Damn it, he thought irritably, while his body trembled with anger and his face frowned. How could he tell her about this? The next day, at home, Baron Vina asked his daughter how yesterday's banquet went. It seemed that yesterday she was barely a baby, and yesterday she had already debuted in secular society. What the girl asked, and sarcastically said it was fun and noticing her father's state. She asked what was wrong with him and what that strange laugh was. The man said that Dad saw everything yesterday. She was accompanied by such a nice young man, and looking at them, immediately remembered the days when he himself was in love with his mother. He asked hopefully if they would get married. Miranda suddenly put her hands behind her back and saying they would talk later. She asked for the moneylender's address. The girl's father said that, of course, he didn't seem kind, but he wouldn't make fun of a person who had paid a debt. And he had put her in a difficult situation. Myra, she said with disgust, that he was still a moneylender. Only a scoundrel would do something as low as making fun of a person who had paid a debt. No matter who she deals with, she will return the money and never see him again. With these words, Miranda walked towards Wiener. Finally, her indebted life had come to an end. When the money comes, many things can be done. This marriage is simply a great opportunity to get rich, and this time her dreams will come true. And while thinking, she had already approached the marked place, but she didn't understand if she had definitely taken the wrong direction. While this is true, and they, like her fruit guild, are probably using this cafe as a cover. All criminals think alike. Damn moneylender, she thought as she opened the door for her brother-in-law. It means she works tirelessly every day to open a cafe. And he simply took someone else's money and opened his with it. Then the plans change. She will place the best 3-story coffee shop next to this one. All for the sake of honest small business owners. Upon entering, she greeted and said she wanted to ask something. A male voice greeted and said he was listening to her. She recognized the voice of the bald moneylender. He was wearing a cute apron and smiling asked her if he could advise her on her menu. Maybe she would like the recommended dishes. Great, said Myra, walking to the bar. The conversation will be short, and she asked him to bring her boss. The man pretended not to understand what she was talking about. He looked at her surprised, tilting his head to the side. The girl wondered if he recognized her. The house, of course, was quite dark, but then she remembered. In the morning, her father told her about the secret code she would need to reach Wiener. That's what she needed. She said she would place an order and asked him to give her everything on the menu. Absolutely all dishes. And as a tip, she would pay him 5 times the amount of the check. The bald moneylender's face immediately changed when he realized why they had come to him. And he frowned, and she asked him if he now understood what she was talking about. He asked her to follow him. Miranda thought that from the outside, it looked like the cafe wasn't that big. But here it turned out to be such a space, taking off his apron. The bald man said she appeared sooner than he thought. She knew, said the girl out loud and indignantly. He remembers her and asked why he was pretending then. He said proudly that behind the counter, he was an ordinary barista. You can't ruin aromatic drinks and smiles. Stopping near one of the brothers-in-law, the bald man said they had arrived and that she was still thinking about her ethics while working. And he spat in his house and opened the door. We didn't get lost and arrived safe and sound, said Wiener, turning his head back. Long time no see, madam. How has life been? He asked. Approaching, she began to look around and asked if everything was fine with her box. The boy said he was bothering her. If only he had greeted her, otherwise, he would immediately talk about the little thing. As her efforts to find her parents' things were not in vain, she saw a box nearby. And Wiener told her to sit down to talk for a while. But the next moment, he threw an envelope with money for 100. I didn't pay attention to the moneylender. And told him to count it. Everything was correct. And immediately ran, without hindrance, towards the box, which was waiting on the round table to take possession of the box again. But then she stumbled carelessly and began to fall face forward, hitting the box in the process. However, she didn't manage to fall. Wiener reacted quickly and ran towards her, grabbed her by the arm, and straightened her up. Worried about the safety of his client, he asked her where she was rushing, without a hint of caution. And he said he was just happy to protect her. Miranda looked surprised at the boy with her big green eyes and thanked the moneylender for his help. But suddenly she came to her senses and turned abruptly, shouting about the box. Everything is fine, said the guy. He put it in a safe package. What a great guy I am. Wiener praised himself while Miranda ran and picked up the box, looking joyfully at the box inside. He asked her how she knew the box was in this box. She jumped without even warning. Myra suggested calling it instinct and said that if there were no problems with the money, then she was leaving. Wiener said that a professional like him only needs to look at the pile to understand how much money is in it. The amount is correct, but the problem is different. The girl turned around. Taking the teapot and handing a cup to her guest, she said she had prepared too much coffee. She guaranteed that the taste was excellent and asked why they didn't drink it together. That's how Miranda ended up at the table with a cup of tea in her hands and reluctantly admitted that it was really delicious. She said that this coffee was prepared by her bald man. She said it wasn't easy to persuade him to make her coffee, and the girl couldn't believe that was his main job. Why do it? Being subordinate to a moneylender. And although she couldn't understand all this, how did he manage to achieve such an exquisite taste? Wiener continued to admire her. How then, smiling, did he say they were seeing each other together? And looking into each other's eyes, they chatted pleasantly while drinking a cup of coffee and asked if this didn't look like a date. It doesn't look like it at all, replied Myra. Then asked the young man approaching, maybe they would have a real date. No, there was a categorical answer, but he kept attracting and offering alternatives. But then Miranda showed the cafe owner her ring finger, and the moneylender said that she wears a very nice ring on her ring finger. But he couldn't understand what she meant. Having finished her coffee, she got up from the table and thanked him for keeping the box intact, since she had nothing else to do in his office. Seeing the lady leave, he asked if he could come into the cafe. He would invite her for a coffee. She turned around, smiled, and said she would think about it. And then the office door slammed shut and Miranda left, but the smile of joy did not disappear from the young man's face. After a while, when the bald man saw the girl off, he returned. Wiener thanked Sean and said she was an interesting person. Chris asked the barista. Yes, said the owner. Although she is not his type at all, but for some reason, he wants to get to know her better. Miranda Avina. How did she run into that woman's wrath? He asked. And then Sean said that this woman had just arrived, and Wiener, after asking for more coffee, went to open the door for the new guest, saying he had been waiting for her, and asked her to walk. Sometimes it happens to everyone that life turns 180 degrees. Her life has changed beyond recognition after her mother's death. Then, her father got into debt due to gambling and lost all his property. But now, she is experiencing unimaginable changes again and understands what it's like to be the Duchess of Solid. The reporters didn't even let them leave the house. The click of the cameras didn't stop for a moment, asking for details, advice, and everything else. Looking out the window, Miranda said that reporters are real demons. And she asked them what they were doing, crowded right in front of someone else's house. Bentley replied that now their romance is the most discussed topic. For them to leave, it is necessary to give them what they want. She asked him if he would offer to give an interview right here, to which the boy replied that not everything was like that. And then a journalist asked to draw everyone's attention there. Duke Bentley Winter and Mrs. Miranda appeared in the open window of a Ben's house and asked why everyone had gathered. Sir, a question suddenly arose from the crowd. If he was always with Mrs. Miranda, the Duke praised them for working even on such a hot day, and suggested postponing the interview until later. Hugging his future wife, he said his baby was trembling like a leaf and asked how they dared to hurt his girl. Everyone was very surprised and embarrassed when a shout arose from the photographing crowd. After receiving the photo, all the reporters ran away, already imagining what the headlines would be. Fighting over who would be the first to break the news. Entering the house, Bentley asked her if she was dizzy. Miranda replied that of course not, it's just acting, and asked him what brought him here. The Duke of Winter said there is something that should not be forgotten before the wedding ceremony. And what? Asked the Baroness. Smiling, her future husband of the year asked her if she had thought about introducing him to her father. The girl handed the gentleman a glass of cold water. The boy thanked his dear and asked if she was implying that he needed to drink water and organize his thoughts. That would be good, she replied. By the way, Miranda asked who this girl with ugly wrinkles on her face is. Lately, she has been trying to pierce him with her gaze. What rude attitude towards the Duke? Asked the assistant. Not only did she seat him on this miserable sofa, but she didn't even serve him tea. The girls started to answer with a shout. The girls continued to fight. Jennifer defended the Duke on all fronts. Winter himself listened to all this with surprise. When he invited Jennifer to smile, his baby was already scared, and the mother's stress was detrimental to the baby. Silence fell in the room. And then Duke Bentley, smiling and looking away, thought that he of course understood that there wasn't a hint of truth in this. But maybe he shouldn't have said such a thing. Exactly, said Miranda sadly and asked. Sue Bentley was very scared. She really thought about how funny it was, but she had to live up to this liar. Suddenly the father entered the room, his hands trembling convulsively. And he asked Miranda what she was talking about a bad influence, about a child. And he fell to his knees. Grabbing him by the neck and pointing at them with his finger, he asked, horrified, if they were really getting married by accident. The girl asked her father to listen to her, but he fainted. When everything calmed down, Bentley said that it seemed his father was very surprised. And he said that Jennifer would be with him until he woke up and offered to talk about their relationship. He asked smilingly, how about we take another look at the contract? It would be a good idea to review everything carefully. She asked him if he was saying this after there had been many changes in it. There were 7 points in the contract, and Bentley was glad she was happy with everything. Yes, she replied, but it's still worth adding a couple more points. Having added a couple more points, she handed the sheet to the Duke and asked what he thought. After reading the young man, he asked what the reason was. The first point was additional, because the problem was that both would receive divorced status. In this case, she would be in a less advantageous position than him, so she asked him to take care of this part and plead guilty during the divorce. She has no conscience whatsoever, he replied, but he agreed. And about the second, she asked if he understood. Yes, the young man replied, but he didn't think she would ask him directly. She said that if he doesn't like it, he can refuse. Well, unexpectedly for Miranda came the answer. Seeing how her face changed, Bentley asked her what was wrong. She herself asked for the safe keys. He will give them to her. She said she had nothing more to add, but speaking of the 7th point, she asked if it was true. And what was the matter? Bentley asked. Was she going to love him? Not at all. She replied. She simply didn't understand why he decided to include this clause in the contract. She is simply full of self-confidence, so she is happy to see it. Miranda, her father suddenly called his daughter, distracting the couple from the conversation. And she turned around. In front of her, she saw her father wrapped in a pink blanket, looking at her with a pitiful gaze. And Jennifer, who was supporting him as she walked beside him. He apologized. He was so surprised that he fell unconscious. The girl put the contract in her bag when the Duke stood up and said he forgot to introduce himself. Placing his hand on his chest, he bowed and said he was happy to see him. Her father, and introduced himself as Bentley Wintersolid. The young man said he should have come sooner if he had known about his daughter's situation. And he apologized for being so late. After that, the 3 of them sat down at the table. The father sat in silence and said he couldn't believe that his daughter Miranda's fiancé was the Duke himself. It seems, said the young man, that you are doing everything a bit out of order, but if he allows it. He wanted to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage and asked how she herself saw it. He met her in a wonderful position and would be happy if they got married. But this is a spontaneous wedding due to the conception of a child. He was worried that it was a hasty decision. He asked his daughter if she wanted to marry the Duke. The girl thought about it. Hearing her father's question, she began to realize the weight of her decision. From now on, she will have to deceive everyone she meets. Spending her life as Bentley Winter's beloved, and even after the divorce, she will remain in people's memory as his beloved. Perhaps this would be a new turning point in her life, and she thought she could face it. The father called his daughter by name. Dad, she said suddenly, looking at him with green eyes and pausing to think. Yes, she can definitely do it. Yes. She said seriously, she wants to become the Duke's wife. And she thought that no matter what happened to her, everything would be better than now. All right, said the man, exhaling and smiling, saying that whatever happens, everything will be for the best. He turned to the gentleman and said that perhaps he had already heard this from his daughter. But Miranda was not his own daughter. The girl lowered her gaze, and the Duke's eyes widened. The gentleman said that he and his wife had no children and thought a lot about adopting a child. And one day, they met a little girl wandering alone in the streets. At that moment, something drew him to her. He thought that if he didn't take this child, then they wouldn't take anyone. He felt it was his duty to protect and give love to this little one. The useless father who brought the girl home makes her suffer so much that he doesn't dare to question Miranda's choice. But there is a part of selfishness in him that desires her happiness. Sir, suddenly, the gentleman Avina turned to the Duke with his head bowed, promising to make his daughter happy. This greatly moved Miranda, and Duke Bentley nodded positively and said that he definitely would. Smiling, he told her father that he would make his daughter the happiest duchess in the world. And he took the baby's hand. This answer made the man laugh, and he said he thought they were rushing things a bit. And the appearance of a grandchild doesn't seem like such a bad idea, he said, presenting the baby. The girl remained silent, and Bentley, smiling, said absolutely. Already seeing off the fiancé, she asked what else they had to do. The young man replied, "Find a dress and an outfit and be on time for the shoot. There is a lot to do." By the way, dear, he asked the bride if she would have time in a week. Look, she asked, surprised why. Smiling, the Duke told her to postpone urgent matters, if any. And he offered to hold the wedding ceremony. The Duke and the woman discussed their affairs. She said that her father was no longer young, so a nearby hospital would not be superfluous. The only disadvantage of this house would be the price. Bentley asked her if she was saying that the high cost was a disadvantage, if she even knew who he was. Of course, the woman said she didn't think so at all. She said that, without a doubt, for the gentleman, this is not a problem. There is not a single inconvenience here, and a more ideal house cannot be found. What do you think, dear? Duke Bentley Winter asked his future wife with a smile. But suddenly noticing what she was doing, he asked her what she was doing there. As Miranda asked, checking the condition of the house, of course. This morning, the Duke brought the statue as a dowry, but perhaps it hadn't entered through the door. The man asked not to destroy the entrance, and then the guy said he understood and decided to find him a mansion. Honey, he suddenly said with a smile, there's no need to check everything scrupulously. The price at which this house is sold is proof of that. He said that he doesn't understand anything about scammers. When Duke Winter asked if she thought they would dare to deceive him in front of him, this man had an air of madness, danger, and intimidation, and all the characteristics were immeasurable. No, she said. He was even afraid of what would happen to them, as expected, the young man replied. His girl knows him from A to Z. Myra was happy about this immeasurable power that now belonged to her. By the way, she suddenly asked him how long he would keep calling her his girl. Then the young man asked her what he should call her then. The Baroness reminded me that she actually has a name. Miranda. All right. All right, my dear Maria. Bentley replied with a smile. She gave up and told him to call her whatever he wanted. But in that case, the girl asked, maybe she could call him something less formal. If you want to think of a nickname, the young man asked, go ahead. The girl laughed wickedly, and a very malicious smile appeared on her face. And she asked him what he thought of the princess. Princess? Duke Winter asked, puzzled. This means that she is comparable in beauty to the princess. It's not like that, said Miranda cheerfully. The prince is scary. Cesar is a snout, and altogether it's a princess. After what was said, both laughed fervently. She asked him which nickname he preferred, Your Highness, or it just doesn't matter, said the fiancé with a smile. Choose it yourself. You, yes, said the princess suddenly, looking at the sunset. Today you don't have to see her off. That's right, but what happened? The Duke asked. The girl wanted to join the guild. She needed to talk to Louis about the fact that she couldn't work the previous schedule. And she asked if this went against the non-proliferation clause. No, replied Bentley, and told her that it was better to tell him how it was and ask him to keep it a secret. The girl said she understood, and waving her hand, wished the princess a good trip. In response, the man smiled, exhaled, and told her that he would pick her up at the same time tomorrow. They agreed, said Myra. Meanwhile, at the Fruit Guild, a guy checking documents said there were more applications this month. But the income remained the same. He sighed deeply and leaned back to stretch his stiff neck. When suddenly, Miranda grabbed him by the shoulder and smilingly asked if he was busy. Louis jumped out of his chair in fright and asked when she managed to appear here. She replied about 3 minutes ago. Patrick asked to tell Mr. Louis something. Otherwise, he has been staying here late for days. He has a lot to do, Myra asked. Everything is fine, he said, and there was no intention to overwhelm her. And he asked her if she even knew whether to give her any work. The girl shuddered. She asked with a smile. She didn't have any tasks at the moment. She choked, by the way, Louis. He said he needed to tell her something. The young man was surprised and bewildered. He rested his head on his hand and looked into his friend's eyes. And he asked her what she wanted to say. As a result, she told him everything and apologized for talking about it during such a busy period. But the young man said that was not the problem, but the danger of this adventure. He asked her if she could maintain her faith in people after losing her parents in an accident. And he asked if the Duke knew what she was doing as a guild member. Miranda turned to her. This case is not that simple, but if something happens to her, he will not be able to intervene. I know, said the girl, looking away, but she had no idea of endangering the guild. The guild had nothing to do with it. He was talking about her. Her reputation, honor, and even her future depended on it. He asked her why she made such a frivolous decision. Miranda asked frivolously. It seems she has nothing else to do running around in her head. She herself perfectly knows the weight of her decision. Then Louis asked if this is what a person would do if they perfectly understood the whole situation. And why didn't she even consult him? From the beginning, she shouldn't have taken this proposal seriously if she had known. As the girl asked, why should she consult him? The young man was stunned, and Myra explained to him that she had already said that those were her concerns. This marriage rested on the shoulders of Miranda Avina. No matter how wonderful a boss is, this is the personal life of his employee. And no one should inform her, the girl explained. You are right, said the young master of the guild with pain in his chest, clenching his fists. This is her personal matter. So she's taking a year off, he asked. No problem. There are enough workers, so you don't have to worry. The girl called him and asked him to stop. It is true, he said, that when the time came for her trump card to go to work, she contacted him, apologized, and asked if she could leave. Miranda saw how her boss's mood changed, how hurt he was, but now she couldn't do anything. All right, he said and left. After a while, Patrick ran into the room and apologized for the fact that they had been waiting for him for so long. That suddenly everyone wanted to drink, he made excuses. When he suddenly noticed that Mr. Louis was alone in the office and asked where Mrs. Miranda was. The young man replied that it was already late, so she left. What to do with the tea? The boy asked. He had prepared 2 cups. So it was. Louis asked and then offered to drink together and thought that he wasn't answering. Not that he didn't know with what thoughts Betty intended to approach her. But did he know that it would hurt Miranda? She knows very well that Miranda is not a frivolous person, no matter how small the job. She still takes it seriously from the beginning. It's sad that she is so caught up in guild matters. But the other guys are also wonderful. There is no reason to worry. But then why? He thought. Here Patrick noticed the cookie crumbs and asked if it was Mrs. Miranda. It was surprising that she behaved at home, even in the master's room. Laughing, Louis said that she was like that with them and asked if she behaved like that on her first day. Yes, Patrick said. He was very nervous at first, but when he saw her, he relaxed. The boy said that then he thought everyone here was like that, but it turned out only Miranda. And the boss, they said. And succumbing to the memory of 17-year-old Miranda, he said that only she lay here comfortably. Then the girl, who had come to this room for the first time, was even ashamed to serve herself cookies. He asked her why she wasn't eating, maybe she wanted something else. And how did it all come to this? Her story begins 5 years ago in winter. Louis was 22 then. Before, he shouted at the foreman that he hadn't said that the insured would be deeply indebted. And among the victims was the house of Alfred, the boy who delivers newspapers. The man asked Louis why he was starting again. This is his job. He feels remorse for the suffering of a person he knows. Enough, this place was not for you, he said. Going out onto the street, he heard the boy fighting with the collectors, not letting them get close. This atmosphere was becoming alarming when he suddenly looked into the distance and saw two more loan sharks blocking the way. They stood up and argued with a little girl. She shouted at them that initially all deadlines were agreed upon, but they were doing everything their own way. Tired of listening to her, the man waved a bat. But the next moment, Louis arrived and protected this little one, repelling the attack with his sword. Miranda was shocked and said that, of course, she didn't know what happened between them. But it was not appropriate for two adult big shots to surround a little girl and even throw a bat at her. She pushed the man. She looked at him and said that it was a very pathetic sight, that the men were scared. He got up cursing and told his partner to leave. Louis asked her if she knew how dangerous the area was. The girl said that they called her. This lady didn't look older than 18, but she also didn't look like she had studied at the academy. When suddenly she heard a loud noise in her stomach, the girl thanked him for the help and told him that she would probably go. Louis stopped her and told her that if she went alone, she would meet these guys on the road again. He asked her if she wanted to have a snack in his office, but if she didn't feel comfortable, then nothing could be done. The girl was surprised by his offer. And now she was sitting modestly on that same sofa. The young man told her to eat this for now. The soup was still warming up. He told her to drink tea before it got cold. To fill her stomach and come back before it was too late, he would take her. And he wouldn't get involved with those people anymore. Suddenly, he noticed that she hadn't moved from her spot and asked her why she wasn't eating. She didn't even touch anything. He asked if she didn't like the soup at all. It's just that the girl suddenly said hesitantly, but the young man seemed to understand without words. And he asked her if she needed to eat first so that she would calm down. And after exchanging portions of soup, she ate a spoonful and said it wouldn't taste good if it got cold. And she told him to eat it. She picked up the soup with a spoon, and right after tasting it, her eyes instantly lit up with happiness. And her cheeks flushed. The young man happily watched as her stew was devoured by both cheeks, and a smile appeared on his face. Having finished the portion, she began to drink tea and asked the uncle to listen to her. The young man was surprised by the address and asked her to call him simply Louis. She had a question and asked Mr. Louis. He works in the guild. The young man shuddered. He asked her how she understood this. Her head was spinning as she tried to understand how she did it, and the girl smiled. Everything is clear, she said. It's worth looking at his office, several documents for disguise, a wig. It seemed strange to her. But now she understood why they did this and asked him if he had talent. What? Are you interested in the job? He asked. Yes, the girl replied, and asked to be allowed to introduce herself. But the young man sharply interrupted her and told her that it was time for them to leave. The girl told the gentleman that she hadn't eaten everything yet and asked him to speak slowly about the guild. The young man said that it was already very late and that it was time for her to go home. I understand. He asked where her house was and also lectured her that in the future she should not appear in this area in the middle of the night. The girl, dissatisfied with the moralizing and the fact that the people interrupting her were not listening. She rolled her eyes and pursed her lips. Miranda suddenly said. He looked at her surprised. Miranda Avina, she said, placing her hand on her chest. This is my name. All right, Miranda, Louis said hesitantly. The girl was proud of herself and thought about her surname. It seems she heard it somewhere. The next day, in the company of his colleague, he exclaimed loudly that he remembered that girl who chased him with her tail. He asked. Yes, the young man said. He kept thinking about it. Avina, this is the runaway family that went bankrupt. God, said his friend. She is a tomboy from an aristocratic family. A colleague asked him if he thought this lady could easily earn a lot of money without really knowing anything. No, Louis said sadly. Miranda, it's not like that. when suddenly the girl peeked around the corner and called Louis. "Miranda," the guy exclaimed loudly, frightened, and asked if she could find him in a ditch. Lifting her nose, she said she simply had a sharp sense of smell and asked if that was an ideal skill for a spy. Today, she came to him again with a request, although most likely he would refuse again. Said Miranda, laughing. But since she is here, at least treat her to some food. Louis looked at the girl with surprise. It wasn't that easy yet. Indeed, in the unbearable days when she had nowhere to go, she came to him. The young man asked Miranda what she wanted to eat soup. She said thoughtfully, and then he said that there was one thing to do. He couldn't trust her to work in the guild. No matter how much he ran after him, nothing would turn out well. Unwavering, she said. But Louis told her that he would feed her anytime, and that she could come whenever she wanted. The girl smiled and said that was fine. In response, the young man looked back at her sweetly. Kindness, while she was thinking about what she should choose for lunch. She remembered the boy who also thanked him for feeding her, thanked him for the newspapers. Louis pursed his lips and wondered if you look at him this way. They haven't seen Alfred at all in the last few days and haven't received a single newspaper since that day. Then the boy cried bitterly, and with his small body, protected the crying father behind the lone sharks. He was thinking that if he knew where he was now, they would have dinner together, when they put a rag over his mouth. The man, threatening him with a knife, asked him, "Do you work in the guild?" Ex-blonde with a puppy face. An unshaven man, covering his mouth, asked him if he wanted to know why he got into so much trouble. And he told him that Alfred was dead. He worked very hard to recover what was taken from him by deceit, and at dawn, he was run over by a carriage. From which he died. If only they, idiots, hadn't listened to the pathetic scoundrels, if he repents even a little. Calmly accept his death, he said. The guy thought he couldn't breathe, it was dangerous. When suddenly, out of nowhere, Miranda flies in and hits the lone shark on the head with a bat. She calls Louis. After dealing with the man, she ran to her friend and asked if he was okay. He was breathing heavily. While on his knees, Louis asked her how she knew about this place. She said she would explain everything later and asked if she should hit him hard on the head again so he wouldn't wake up quickly. But the young man didn't answer. He looked down and remembered the words that his little friend had died. Getting up, he said there was no need to do this, that he was fine, and taking off his cloak. He covered the man who attacked him with it. And so, a few days later, after meeting in Louis's office, he menacingly asked if that meant that all this time he had been under her tracking spell. Yes, Miranda replied guiltily. The young man said that, of course, he understands that she had no bad intentions, but don't you dare continue in the same spirit. It's dangerous. He asked her what she would have done if that person hadn't lost consciousness. She would repeat it again. She wouldn't become a guild member if she pursued him. The girl apologized. Exhaling deeply, the young man said that this is not just a dangerous task. She herself knows that some people have a thirst for revenge. Therefore, come to the guild that I will create. Finally, Louis suggested to her. The girl's green eyes widened, and she asked him in surprise if he wanted to create a guild. The young man said that he understood that the idea might seem stupid, and the work is not easy. But at least she won't get involved in the criminal world. The members of his guild will not suffer guilt or threats. That's right, he wants to create a guild that is like a family. She was surprised. Miranda, he said, had all the qualities of a guild member. A photographic memory, enviable audacity, an innate talent for acting. The girl didn't understand if this was a compliment. All she needed was a place where she could work safely, said Louis. And she would have that place, and he held out his hand to her. Myra asked him why he was doing this, and pursed her lips, and the young man said that he was sure he would regret it if he handed her over to another guild. All right, said the girl suddenly, and getting up from her seat, she shook her friend's hand. And smiling, she asked the master to take care of her. The girl thought that she wouldn't even know what happened to her if it weren't for Louis, and that offer was the happiest moment of her life. It sounded like an offer to form a family. All this time, she was touching the fabric of the dress in front, but then the Duke called her and asked her what she was thinking about. Nothing, replied Miranda. I was just looking at the dress. All right, he replied. He is willing to respect her choice. What are you talking about? The girl asked and instantly diverted her gaze to the dress, the fabric of which she held in her hands. The next moment, she abruptly jumped away from him and said loudly that this was not her type. I just took a look. The designer was ahead of his time. Thank God, said Bentley. He was already thinking of calling the senator, although he would have fainted. And while Winter was trying to figure out with his daughter-in-law what had happened to her, the ladies in the store had already called the lady, telling her that she was already bringing the dresses to try on. Miranda told her fiancé that they would talk later, but for now she would go try on dresses. And she would come back. How did these dresses fit her? The saleswoman said, Dear, you are the most beautiful, said the princess. No matter what she put on, she was beautiful in everything. The girl thought she was very tired. It was also very hot here, and they were sitting with their arms crossed and reacting slowly. And then she asked why the Duke didn't try on a couple of suits. Otherwise, she was so bored. When will this end? Bentley asked. The saleswoman happily supported Miranda's idea and said that they would have to go out together in wedding dresses, so they should try them on together. That's what she thought. She said that it takes a long time to put on a tuxedo, and while they were taking the Duke away, a woman approached Miranda and asked if she knew how dazzling they considered her. Of course, she said, her social status had skyrocketed in one morning. Well, an impoverished noblewoman would never have dreamed of such dresses. She asked with a smile if she liked the dresses. Mrs. Miranda must have found this strange. So the choice was especially difficult for her. Dresses must be selected according to body characteristics, she pointed out. And she asked her if she knew about this. The girl was indignant. And while this woman was still trying to humiliate her in some way, Miranda suddenly sharply interrupted her and asked her what her name was. She leaned sharply towards the badge attached to her chest and said that the stupid word described her perfectly. Apparently, she didn't know that it was better not to annoy the Duke's fiancé. She sharply tore off her badge and, breaking it with one hand, said to listen carefully. She asked if she could see this straight line of shoulders and told her to wear a dress with open shoulders and a one-year skirt. She said to bring 3 of these dresses. She was tired of these dress-up games and said she had 5 minutes. What strange people. The friend heard the fiancé's voice. Bentley said he escaped. The quality in the store is good, but the owner pays too much attention to status. He was already thinking of taking care of her, but she sent him to hell. She already understood, she said. It's funny because she, however, never had extra money, so she didn't have to choose clothes. And that's why she got angry. Good job. The Duke praised her. Of course, said Myra, with the Duke's name it's much easier, and she apologized because she would borrow it from time to time. He said there was no need to apologize, he would suit her very well. And finally they brought her a normal dress. The girl happily said it was beautiful, that she could do it if she wanted to. The girl said that she also brought what the Duke tried on, but the young man told her to leave it and, hugging the bride, he said he wanted his beloved to choose a tuxedo for him. Miranda asked indignantly why he was doing that suddenly. The young man explained that they were simply playing the role of a married couple. After all, he had to show himself as a loving and caring husband. Moreover, he said with a smile, I think you will do a much better job choosing a tuxedo than these people. A blush appeared on Miranda's cheeks. She was a little embarrassed by such a compliment. And the next moment she asked if he had heard it and what they were doing anyway. They hadn't seen the princess's snow-white skin. Dear, this address, a friend said to the Duke. As a result, he scolded them a little more, and after the Duke said when leaving that he would prepare everything else. She picked up the dress, and with that her work was done, the girl thanked him. When Bentley noticed that she seemed to be in a better mood, otherwise she had a very bitter face since the morning. I am beautiful even with a bitter face, no? Asked the Baroness. The Duke said he was glad she thought so. She said that this referred to her friend. He had quarreled with a close friend, which greatly upset the latter. His friend didn't understand anything that was being said. And he wanted his friend to believe as much as he believes in him. He must seem like an immature child in her eyes. Winter asked if that meant that she couldn't trust him now either. That's not the point, Miranda replied. So, wouldn't it be better to approach it from the other side? Bentley suggested. The reason for her concern is that she wants to get along with her acquaintance. I think so, she said. Not me, but her acquaintance, she corrected her future husband, and make peace, the Duke replied to this girl. It's not about her, she said again. Suddenly, Bentley stopped in his tracks, shuddering, when he saw the brigade in front of him, and said irritably that they had followed him here. Suspecting and without even trying to hide it, Myra said. Pushing his future wife around the corner, he said that they probably didn't like the couple she had chosen, and that if they were caught, both would have to listen to sermons for several days. The groom's family is cruel if they don't like it, said the Duke. Maybe she could use teleportation. She asked him why he couldn't do it himself. She herself could not transfer two people. Bentley said sadly that he didn't want to use magic unnecessarily, damn it. He said, they are about to be surrounded. Then Miranda noticed a hole in the top of a nearby stone fence, and she asked the Duke what he thought about that place to escape. The young man looked at this hole in amazement and asked Darlene if it was the wall of someone else's house. Myra, the correct answer, told him. How ingenious. Bentley asked her if she intended to illegally enter someone else's house. Don't worry, exclaimed the girl, jumping onto the wall. She knows this area like the back of her hand. She told her future husband that this house was empty and told him to hurry in. The young man's eyes sparkled. Miranda asked what was wrong. No, Winter didn't answer anything and jumped behind him and said he was just thinking about the old days. Having gotten down, the girl said, then they unhooked from the tail and she asked them if it was good that they did what she said. The young man nodded. For the first time, someone forced him to climb over the wall. Duke Bentley looked around and asked. But this was not the first time for her. The Baroness rolled her eyes and said he was a good boy. By the way here, she said. The alley is quite deserted, and she asked how it was possible to catch a carriage here. The young man asked if they could take a walk then. Her house is nearby. Well then let's go, said the smiling young man, taking his future wife's hand. Miranda asked why the Duke took her hand. Bentley replied that there were many extra eyes. They needed to play the role of a sweet married couple. Walking down the street, Bentley asked Milia if her friends would come to the wedding. Yes, the girl said, her father and that friend, and the young man said he would invite a friend. But that he was unlikely to come. He said that there would probably be many uninvited guests, hitmen, envious people. Admirers of the Duke, the girl asked. He laughed and said that it wouldn't be bad if the latter came and saw for themselves in everything. He also asked Myra to let him know if there was anyone who might start making a fuss at the party. Someone like the former madman who followed him home after the news of their engagement. Miranda laughed and said that this was unlikely to happen. It was even impossible when she suddenly fell silent, looking ahead. Around the corner of the house that was nearby, Louis was separated from the world, from which darkness emanated. The next moment, the Baroness apologized to the princess and told her that she thought it was time for him to go home. Then the Duke suddenly asked. Since he came here, he thought it would be nice to greet his father, but taking her hand. She told him that's all for today. Putting her future husband into the carriage, she waved her hand and wished the princess a happy journey. And he asked the coachman to take him to the solid family mansion, which was lost. Is the ex really crazy? The gentleman asked, and even today he doesn't treat him with cold water. He said the princess has cold water at home, so she can treat him there. But the carriage had already started moving and the girl, waving her hands at him. She said they would see each other later. Bentley was surprised, and the next moment, bidding farewell to the Duke, he ran to the same place where he had seen his friend before. Running towards his destination, he called out to Louis, and he looked surprised at his friend running towards him. He moved away from the house he had leaned on before and asked him what happened, why he ran. Myra replied that she wouldn't fall because she wasn't a little girl. That's right, said the young man with golden hair, closing his eyes and nodding his head. Miranda is no longer a little girl. But in his eyes, he admitted to his worker, she is still that little girl. After saying that, the boy smiled and raised his eyebrows. He kept looking at her and asked if she wanted to go for a walk. During the walk, he asked Louis if he remembered the day they founded their guild. I remember, of course. He replied. The girl admitted that she was glad to have finally started working then. But she was much happier to have a place that felt like a real home. It was as if she had an older brother. She trusted him with so much strength and thought of him as a family member, and said she regretted the words she had said before. After a brief pause, Louis informed Miranda that it wasn't like that it was his fault. And he apologized for his reckless words. Because she was probably thinking about this decision. No, the girl replied, it's reckless and he knows it. He hinted that he was going to do something dangerous from the first meeting. It's no wonder how she feels. Not at all. That was the boy's response to the contrary. His guilt exists only because of the persistence with which she followed him then. Don't be discouraged, he asked her. Smile, Miranda, he said, so it seemed like she was about to cry at that moment. But the smile still shone on her face. The girl agreed with him. And in response to this pained face, she returned the smile to him too. And then he asked her if she felt anything for the Duke. Why are these questions suddenly being asked? How can someone fall in love with this madman? Louis explained that he was the most popular boy in the Empire, and believed that falling in love with him was not difficult. It didn't matter if she liked him or not, they would be together for a whole year. He asked if it would be useful to know the positive sides of a couple. Miranda thought about it, and she said that the possible positive side of the Duke is the pleasure of defeating an arrogant demon. Louis laughed and said that this is no longer about the Duke. As expected, she is still a little girl. Myra pointed out with disgust that he was treating her like a little girl again. Louis's cheeks were red from laughing so much. He smiled and said he would try not to look at her like that. In response, Miranda smilingly said that he could trust her just as she trusts him. She is an adult now. She is already over 20 years old. Hearing this, the boy's eyes widened. He seemed to realize the whole truth of time, and a red blush appeared on his cheeks. She asked him if he would trust her, and the young man replied. Then Marinata asked why she wasn't coming to his wedding. Okay, he said, and asked when, 2 days later, he said. The boy's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. At the same time, in Duke Solid's mansion, Jennifer looked at her master with a worried frown. She thought the Duke was in such a strange state, staring out the window since his return. Bentley continued to look out the window, and the memories of today and the day with his childhood friend flashed before his eyes. He suddenly asked if it was difficult to treat him with cold water. Hearing this, the assistant asked again and asked him if he liked chamomile tea. She prepared it for a good sleep. It's really all because of the cold water he drank at Miranda's house. The taste was very addictive, but it will cook much better. The rabbit kept squealing. She told the Duke not to worry, that she would contact the merchants tomorrow. When suddenly someone knocked on the door and a voice asked if Betty was there. And Bentley told him to come in and asked him what could have happened to Louis at that hour. The young man apologized to his friend for being so late, but he needed to tell him something. And Winter asked Jennifer to leave. Passing the girl who was heading towards the exit, Louis apologized to her. But she replied that everything was fine. And as Jennifer closed the door behind her, her friend arrived and said she had a wedding in 2 days. The Duke apologized and said there was no opportunity to say it in person. Louis said sadly that there were some things he wanted to check before getting married. He asked Betty if she really didn't like Miranda. Bentley shuddered and asked if the fox knew what a fake marriage was. And then why those questions? Duke Winter laughed and said he didn't expect this from him. He knows that he won't trust anyone without a reason. He and Miranda just had a beneficial relationship. So maybe he asked, but Bentley firmly replied no, emphatically. Okay, I get it, said Louis and turned around and went to the sofa. He said he then had a request. He sat on the sofa towards which he was walking so quickly, and said that Miranda would be with him for a whole year. And he asked him to please become someone she could trust. Resting his head on his hand, Betty asked if it was possible for a person who trusts no one to become someone they can trust. In response, the boy exhaled, smiled, and asked if this could somehow be influenced. Duke Winter looked away and said thoughtfully that he would think about it. Then the fox asked him to promise never to cry for him and to provide him with 3 meals a day. This child can cry even from hunger. Okay, I promise. Bentley replied. And while drinking a cup of chamomile tea, he expressed his comments that he acted as if he were his father. The boy laughed and said he looked more like an older brother. And getting up from the sofa, Louis said to take care of Miranda and that he came to say this. "That's all okay," the Duke replied. And before leaving the room, the boy stopped abruptly near the door and said that he congratulated him, Betty, on his wedding. After that, the boy left and leaned against the closed door. Thinking that Betty was definitely not interested in Miranda, maybe she wasn't interested in him either. Thank God, he thought at the end of his thoughts and suddenly froze. He wondered why he thought that. 2 days later, the wedding took place. The priest addressed the bride and groom and asked if they had sworn to love each other until old age. "We swear," said Baroness Miranda and Duke Bentley at the same time. The public protested against this wedding. Someone cried. Then, the priest said loudly and enthusiastically, he proclaimed them husband and wife. Wide smiles lit up the faces of the newlyweds. Smiling at all the guests, Miranda told the princess that she was bad at weddings, that all her hair was already gray. "Darling," she replied, "just pretend she doesn't see it, look at the guests and laugh." In an authoritative tone, she asked, as if he were not her master. From that moment on, she became the wife of Bentley Winter, that is, a national thief. The eyes of the sobbing women looking at her were full of hatred. In the aisle, the tears of a middle-aged man crying were also heard. She mentally told her dad that he looked strange from the outside, "Stop crying. And wipe your snot." Realizing this state of his wife's father, Bentley said to continue on their way. That it was time for them. Myra agreed. As she walked, she thought that if this was a wedding, everything seemed unreal to her, and now she would open the door and just go home. Suddenly, she had the strange feeling that someone was watching her, and she turned around sharply. She noticed the furious and fierce gaze in the red eyes of the woman in the black hat. But then she turned around. "Who is this?" Miranda wondered worriedly, a fan of the Duke, but neither of them had ever looked at her like that. After the ceremony, everyone went out into the garden. Miranda stood behind a column. She hid from prying eyes and thought about how tired she was. Living under so much attention was extremely exhausting. Especially these evil looks from the Duke's fans, the life of a star is difficult. So that woman amazed her more than anyone. She had never seen anything like it before. Suddenly, a painfully familiar voice was heard nearby, asking her why she looked so sad on such a clear day. Miranda instantly looked aside and saw Louis smiling cheerfully in front of her. She happily said that he had come. Her head was spinning, so she just waved hello. The boy laughed and said that the wedding day was the only way. "You are a beauty today," he said. Myra was surprised and said it was the first time in a day she had heard this. Not even Bentley Winter said that. Suddenly, a voice was heard. The princess said that he had told her in the store that she was beautiful. Now she was trying to calm her father and asked him what he was doing here. Running closer, she asked her father if he knew who he was. The man cheerfully greeted Miranda's boss and thanked him for coming, despite being busy at the restaurant. Bentley was stunned and asked the dear one in a whisper if she worked in a restaurant. She replied that she couldn't talk about the guild, so to her father it was a restaurant. And then she asked if she could leave when the banquet was over. She could, replied the Duke. Anyway, they had already greeted everyone. Tears appeared again in the father's eyes. His face turned red, and he called his daughter by her name. Wiping his tears with a handkerchief, he asked awkwardly if she was leaving already. Miranda said she was crying again. And she said that it didn't mean they wouldn't see each other again. She said that this morning they ate meat together, and as she was about to wash the dishes, she thought she wouldn't use this pan anymore. She is getting married today. From now on, she would have to live in Bentley Winter and not with her father. After the banquet, she would not return to a dilapidated and ruined house, but to a large palace. She hugged her father. Tenderly but firmly hugging the man's neck, she said she would come back often. It's difficult, but she will try to get close to him every day so that he gets tired himself. Miranda's husband and friends smiled. And finally night came, and the coachman told the girl that they had arrived at the solid family palace. Today she would live here. They told her to rest, so she arrived earlier and thought that, as she had heard. The palace was grand. But for some reason, it was very quiet here. Well, she didn't think of anything special. She needs to rest. Now a soft bed and warm water await her. Suddenly, a woman's voice was heard from the side. She apologized and asked if she was Mrs. Miranda. Yes. And what did the girl answer? Was it a waitress with glasses? She said that she was probably very tired after coming over there and asked to call her Leela. She is the head maid. Bentley accompanied his wife and told her that the servants would be waiting for her at the palace. They would explain everything and tell her to relax. Miranda said that if anyone else heard this, everyone would immediately think she was some kind of child. Winter replied that this was true and asked her to think about what had been happening for several weeks. She asked her husband if the princess hadn't caused most of the trouble. The Duke replied that at most half, Louis watched their dialogue, saw his employee smile sweetly, and agree with his friend. And finally, she got into the carriage and said she was leaving and wished her husband would see her soon. The next moment, the guy turned his gaze to the young man who continued to pierce his back. Louis looked bewildered at the Duke, who was approaching him with heavy but measured steps. He approached the guild master without ceasing to look him in the eyes, a heavy atmosphere. Even oppressive floated. Like then, the fox asked Betty if he was too close. Now everyone only looks at him. He needs to be more careful. To which the Duke replied that he wouldn't hurt him either. Bentley told him he was crossing the line and asked if that was the way to speak kindly to someone else's father-in-law, or to congratulate someone else's wife. Louis looked at his friend, who was slightly shorter than him, and said he no longer knew what had come to him. He simply spoke as a guild leader and family member. "What's wrong with you?" The guild master asked his old friend and said he hoped he was only joking. But at the same time, a memory flashed before Bentley's eyes of how his friend looked at his wife with pity. And he said maybe. Looking him straight in the eyes, he said coldly that it doesn't mean he doesn't know about their relationship. But he asked him to remember that there are many eyes here. When suddenly their conversation was interrupted by Jennifer, who called the Duke and told him that there were still many people to greet. The Inter told his friend that he had to leave. Louis said that he also had to leave. "In any case," said the Duke, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder, "you must not forget. Even if it's not a real marriage, Miranda is your wife." He asked him not to behave so hastily. He didn't want to ruin his younger sister's reputation. "I understand," said Louis. He doesn't want this and apologized for bothering him. And then Jennifer ran. "Go to work," said the guild master. The assistant is waiting for him, and he, however, is leaving. Winter thanked him for coming. "Duke," said Jennifer, "it was impossible to let that man go so early." Winter asked her if she was sure she should call her lover and her wife like that. Smiling, the Duke said happily that she should come up with something else. "But don't call her darling. It's his privilege." The girl shouted that she didn't even intend to. In any case, they had to greet everyone together, and Miranda left. The Duke asked what she was staying here for. She would be tired, and the assistant started threatening the senators. She said they were very unhappy about not being invited this time. The boy replied that they were unhappy with everything she did, when suddenly they invited Betty. Looking around, the Lord of the Magic Tower saw a girl with bright red hair in front of him, and a ruby on her neck. He immediately recognized her. A wide smile was drawn on his face. He narrowed his eyes and said with joy and tenderness that she had come, Isabella. At the same time, in the Aulid family palace, the maid asked to be allowed to show her the palace, and asked if she only had one suitcase. And the girl replied. Looking at the head maid, Miranda thought she looked like a very calm person, and quiet, the opposite of Jennifer. Leela, noticing that she was being stared at, asked what was wrong. "No," said Myra excitedly. She just hadn't seen the servants in a long time. She wondered if this had bothered her, when suddenly the head housekeeper said that, since today she is the Duke's wife, she can call her by her first name. She asked the owner about this. Miranda was very surprised. It had been a long time since she experienced this, but she agreed. Layla said that the palace consists of 3 buildings, the main one in the center, the owner's house, and an extension to the left, then a garden that is carefully looked after by the gardeners. This is a dining room. The chef works at any time except at night, so you can eat whenever it suits you. Next to it is the living room, said the maid, when suddenly Miranda asked her to stop. The maid asked what was wrong. Myra said she was glad she was showing her all the corners. But she was interested in the question of why no one was here. It was strange. She couldn't believe she wouldn't run into anyone. The maid agreed with her. She said she was forced to accompany her because the maid in charge suddenly disappeared. And she asked to be allowed to find out what was going on and wait for her here. She apologized to her mistress, but as head maid, she couldn't just watch this situation. It would be good if she familiarized herself with it while waiting. The next moment, Leela handed her a book and told her that this is the Duke's manual. The location and details of the equipment are written here. She, as his wife, should know this. And with these words, she said she would be back soon and asked her to wait a little. Miranda was about to run after her, but stopped. And so, after a while, she realized that she was lost within the walls of this palace. At first, she was going to go to the room to rest, but the house is so big that even if there was a map, she couldn't find a single guest room. From the madness of the endless and repetitive walls, she only realized that it was already dark outside. But she didn't know how long, when suddenly she directed her attention to the book. Myra, she opened the page with the rules of conduct and read something about the prohibitions. First, do not enter the annex without the Duke's permission. Rule 2. From 1 in the morning until midnight, it is forbidden to enter or leave the palace. This rule must be observed by everyone, without exception. Even in emergency situations, violating it is strictly prohibited. What nonsense? She asked out loud. You can't even go to the bathroom at night or something. How cruel, said Miranda. She will pay for this and again began to look for the third rule in the book, if it is at this moment. When suddenly, unexpectedly, a cold breeze blew through the palace corridor. And it blew out the candle near the ceiling, the girl gasped. The third rule of conduct of the Duke, if at this moment you find someone who looks like an animal, do not look at him and immediately go to another room, because our Duke does not guarantee or take responsibility for accidents caused by ignoring or violating these rules of conduct. What is this? Miranda thought about the guard when she saw the silhouette of a man around the corner, wondering what time it was. If it was really 11 o'clock. She tried to read what was written in the third rule, but because of the blown-out candle, nothing was visible. If at that moment they found out, she was reading when suddenly, with her peripheral vision, she saw a hand near her head. She screamed loudly in fear, but the next moment the Duke gently pressed her against him and asked her on the way where she had gone. He was looking for her. She looked at Winter in shock and wondered if he was that strange silhouette when she noticed the servants. Bentley asked the dear one what she was doing. She just stood like a pillar and told him to jump towards him, just as she said. Princess, he suddenly called out loudly to her husband, and the maids turned at the girl's cry. Seeing the Duke of Winter on his neck, she asked why he was so late. She was alone and sad. This is unbearable, she said out loud. She missed her princess's breasts so much that the boy with a disgusted look said he tried to return early. He admitted that even after searching the whole house, he didn't see her anywhere. If she knew how scared he was. The girl said that loneliness depresses her a lot. But then she told her husband that no matter where she went, no one came out. The man turned sharply to the maids and asked them what this meant. Master, shouted the 3 new maids loudly, kneeling down and bowing their heads. Kill us, Miranda asked indifferently what killing meant, what they were talking about. The girls trembled with fear. Then, Bentley said that it was impossible to let their offense go unpunished, to leave the Duchess unseen on the first day of her marriage. The Lord of the Magic Tower asked if he could accept this as a challenge. They were willing to pay for it. Miranda tried to stop the Duke. I apologize, said Leela bowing. She, as head maid, is responsible for the mistakes of other palace workers. And she asked to be allowed to fix the situation herself. Please, she begged. Forgive them this time. The Duke looked arrogantly at his maid and asked if she understood who she was talking to now. When suddenly, their tense dialogue was interrupted by the loud noise of the newly created Duchess's stomach. She gasped, and when her husband smiled, He suggested they eat first and then kill whoever they wanted. And now Miranda was happily sitting at the table, devouring the food with both cheeks. She thought about how long it had been since she last ate so well. She asked the Duke why he wasn't eating, and the man replied smilingly that you can only get enough by watching your loved one eat. He asked if her previous words were true. Yes, he replied. No one knew her except Leela, strange, said the Duke. The opposite of what the maids told him. Myra asked him what he had said, and the Duke explained that she simply ignored the servants and said that she didn't need an escort. This was not the case out loud, and the Duchess said indignantly, even if you ask Leela. The boy explained that he didn't say he didn't believe her, but he didn't say the opposite either. Leaning thoughtfully on his crossed arms, the inter said that one of them was definitely lying. And the maids were hiding something. She was trembling with fear, but didn't tell the truth. Clearly, it wasn't just the maid who did this. Maybe someone was behind this. Someone else. To be honest, the friend said, look. She thought it was the princess's work, something like a surprise. The Duke said he would remember that. The girl said out loud that she didn't like it. If it wasn't him, then they really wanted to intimidate her. But why are they really making fun of her, thinking that the daughter of an impoverished aristocrat cannot be his lover? She thought, whatever their intentions, they could not ignore what happened to the Duchess. He needed to get to the truth. He said, no, Duke, don't do anything. Wiping her lips, she forgave her wife. Leave it in her hands. This is a challenge not only to the princess. Miranda told her husband that she wanted to know the reason why they were doing this. But he asked her, is that okay? Bentley said, getting up from the table. Then he entrusts this to her. She is a swindler, and far from a simple one, she asked to be corrected. She is a spy, yes, replied the Duke, the guild's trump card. And finally, Miranda reached her soft bed and said it was only a miracle to fall into the arms of her pillow. She thought that today had been unbearably long, how tired she was, the delicious food. In the soft bed. The investigation could wait. And this was the first night. For some reason, the atmosphere was unusual, and she wondered if they would sleep together. The underwear they gave her wasn't much, but it would worry the Duke. She would like them to sleep in separate rooms. But that would be suspicious, she thought. She didn't know, yes, they kissed, but sleeping in the same bed. From these thoughts, she buried her face in the pillow when the Duke got up. He asked his beloved, holding his head, if she was really trying to smell his scent on the bedding. No, she said out loud, jumping off the bed. I was just checking if it smelled like sweat. The boy asked, but she was embarrassed. He straightened the cloak that had fallen off his shoulders and asked her if she wasn't worried about her clothes, or what he thought of her. Miranda stammered and asked him what he was doing. She was quite in keeping with the look of this room. The young man nodded. Apparently, he said, the maids were looking forward to this. They had already given her an eel drink, so she should live up to their expectations. The next moment, Bentley Winter threw Miranda onto the bed and hung over her, looking directly into her eyes. Betty, son, you will soon become the head of the Sold family. So don't forget it, his father told him. Many are waiting for the moment when he makes a mistake. He must not show weakness, he must be perfect, he must be understood, he asked. You can't trust anyone. Duke, can you hear me? Jennifer asked loudly, and when he finally answered. She said she already thought he was sleeping, and started talking about the Senate. He asked Jennifer if she knew how many hours they spent at the banquet, and asked her to at least not bother him with questions on the way. He asked if his beloved had returned home safely. She replied that she had. The maids came out to meet her and told her that they had prepared a bath for her. The Duke said, well, if this is possible, don't leave her alone. The assistant said that this is contrary to his orders. No, not in that sense, explained Duke Winter. He meant to watch Miranda. You never know, but she is above all a spy accustomed to deceiving other people and extracting information from them. Besides, he knows nothing about her skills, although she is not very skilled in using them. But he needs to reduce the risks. Okay, said Jennifer with her head bowed. She will appoint a special maid as soon as possible. You must be impeccable, this said the father, but the assistant was looking at the schedule. But the young man told her to rest too. But he himself died precisely because he showed his weakness to someone he trusted. and since then, he has not allowed himself to do so. And then he looked at the girl lying on the bed below him, looking at him with surprised eyes. And her cheeks were turning red. You can't trust anyone. It went through his head again and again, and he pressed his lips together. This curse torments him to this day. In the morning, with the first rays of sun that brightly illuminated the room, Miranda also woke up. Jumping out of bed, she thought what kind of rich house this was, but immediately remembered that she lives here now. But where has he gone? Suddenly, the girl touched her neck and discovered a kind of choker with a stone in the middle. The click sounded throughout the room when last night the man pushed her onto the bed and put it around her neck. Then he explained that it was a choker that sealed magic. He didn't know what she would do without supervision. Excitedly, Miranda asked if anything dangerous would happen. She didn't see how the servants tortured her. This is solved if we dismiss them, he said, and besides, it was already 11 o'clock and she asked if she had found out about the prohibitions. It was time to sleep. The first night there was no coercion, but he put this choker on her, and together they made a mess in the room to fool the servants. I don't know, she thought. He wants to be crazy and cold-blooded, but in reality he is playful and friendly. Even when he acts like he doesn't trust anyone. Suddenly, the room door opened, and the red-haired maid told the lady that she had been told that she was having breakfast in the bedroom today. That's right, said Myra, turning on the performance and asking where the Duke had gone. The maid explained that early in the morning, he went to the imperial palace. She told her to clean her room during the day. Otherwise, she had no strength after such a night. She didn't think it would be so hot. Okay, thought Miranda as the maid left. This is enough to start with an advantage. Suddenly, seeing the contents of her tray, she stopped the maid and asked her to come closer to her, and told her to bring the person in charge of the food. After a while, everyone gathered in the Duchess's room, knelt down, and told the lady to kill them. She sighed deeply and thought that something was wrong with them. As always, only the head housekeeper apologized for them. They started praying for death when she asked for normal food. Nonsense. She thought she was trying to be a sweet duchess. But she couldn't. The next moment, she wanted to scold the servants, but she slipped on the fabric on the floor. She wanted to grab something to avoid falling, but instead threw the entire contents of the tray onto the servants. She didn't want to be too polite, and although she felt uncomfortable from the fall, she stood up firmly and angrily said that next time she would tear them to pieces. Leela asked if everything was all right, if she had hit herself. But Myra said it was on purpose and asked her to explain that ridiculous diet plan. The head maid said that it seemed the servants were confused about the food. She would talk to the offending maid. The Duchess said that they should not think that they would be forgiven next time. I will, said Leela. And then his master's wife said that she planned to take a walk in the afternoon, that she would go to greet her father. She knocked on the door of the house and told Dad that her beloved daughter had arrived. But no one opened the door. Then she found out that the door was not locked. Upon entering, she called out to her father, but also noticed that the house was as clean as ever. If she forgot to lock the door, Miranda thought, she thought about helping him with the move. But it would probably have to be rescheduled. As she walked up the stairs to the top floor, she told herself that since she was here, she would take the things she hadn't packed yet, clothes, a disguise. And we should also take my mother's music box, but when she opened the box, she discovered that it was missing. At the same time, Wiener was sitting in the cafe and said that the atmosphere was very quiet. The weather was good, the coffee was delicious. There was really no one to have fun with. He was already tired of waiting. There was no music box, but Marinade felt the distinctive and familiar aroma of coffee. Faint but very sweet. When suddenly a voice called the girl and asked if it was her, Myra immediately recognized her father's voice. She went downstairs to the first floor and told Dad that it looked like a thief had broken in. The man was very surprised and said that there was nothing to steal here. There was nothing to eat, his daughter told him out loud, and this was his mother's box. She asked him if he had seen her lately. No, replied the father. She hid it as soon as she returned it. Obviously, the box had been stolen. The gentleman suggested that Miranda search together. She might get lost among the things she had prepared for the move. But the aroma of coffee still lingered in the room. No, she said. It's him, he has an idea. Get ready, disgusting loan shark. The girl almost immediately ran to the cafe and asked the employee where her boss was. The bald guessed and asked what he wanted. Banging on the table, he said he hadn't come here for coffee, but for an important matter. The barista apologized, but such behavior is forbidden in his cafe. Are you kidding? Asked Miranda. I need a password, and she started to recall what something on the menu sounded like. She asked if she could order the most expensive item on the menu, and of course ordered a good octopus latte. And strawberry. When a voice behind him asked him to give him everything on the menu, absolutely all the dishes. As a tip, he would pay 5 times the amount of the bill. Miranda turned around. You, said the Duchess out loud. The boy stood next to her at the bar counter and smiled and said, What a pity that the lady has already forgotten the password. She asked the girl who brought her here, maybe for free coffee or finally wanting to go on a date. Miranda abruptly approached his face and, irritated, reported that her mother's box was missing. And she asked him if it was his doing. The boy was surprised by her closeness and said, squinting, that he didn't even know about it. And he asked the Duchess if there were too many eyes here. Maybe we should go in. She reluctantly agreed. After serving the coffee cups, he said that she was looking around again, telling her to calm down and have a cup of coffee. He placed the cup in front of her and asked, It's a wonderful aroma. It barely smelled like normal coffee, but much sweeter. The winner said he would hurry to bother her. The box is not here. Look all you want. You won't find anything. Miranda asked him how he hadn't taken it. The girl said that no matter how much she thought about it, the coffee shop owner sounded too suspicious. He said that not all questions can be answered without external help. Sometimes you have to rely on other people. That's why she came, she asked. Look, she asked him what he meant. Taking her hand, he told her that if she couldn't do it alone, she would have to cooperate, and again asked her out on a date. Taking her hand with the ring, she told him she didn't need anything else, just to go shopping when the weather was nice. To have a delicious dinner and watch the sunset together. She asked him if he would agree, if there was time, to have a glass of wine to talk about her life. And complain about it. To laugh together at ridiculous stories. She just needs to spend a day with him. Do you value this box highly? He asked. What nonsense. Miranda thought. She's just in shock if he hits her in the furrow or something. But this brat is her only lead. A date. Nothing is impossible when it comes to Mom's box. She clenched her hand into a fist when suddenly a warm hand was on her shoulder. And a voice behind her asked if there were too many interested gentlemen in her journey. Oh, said Winner, smiling, and Miranda shuddered in surprise with wide eyes. She asked the Duke how he ended up here. I forgot that you have something like a bell around your neck that prevents all sorts of trouble when he can't be there. Bentley said. And it also doesn't allow loafers like some to get close. The guy felt offended by the word loafer, and the Duke suggested he leave alone. Wait, Duke, he suddenly shouted. He needs to say something. Wiener replied that their meeting had come to an end, and next time they would talk about this wonderful coffee. By the way, he suddenly spoke in code. You shouldn't roll up your sleeves during a normal conversation while having a cup of coffee. In private, such subtleties can be overlooked. And after all this, he wished her a good trip. Winter gave her an irritated look. Once on the street, Myra told Bentley that he shouldn't have come for her, that she had things to do. The guy asked her what business she could have in such a place. He said he heard she went to his father's house, and after the signal was cut. He came here just in case, and found her in a secret room with an eccentric. Frowning, the sweet girl said they had an important conversation. Bentley asked what kind of important conversation it was with a person who didn't seem too trustworthy. The wife explained that she had come to look for the box. The young man frowned, and she explained that this man had taken it from her once. So she went to him. It turns out, Winter asked, she went to him, knowing that he was not an ordinary coffee shop owner, and running around for some children's toy. After these words, Miranda became furious and shouted loudly that this was a gift from her late mother. Not a toy, but all that remained of her. The Duke's eyes widened. Bentley Winter was very confused and asked if they should return to the cafe. He fidgeted anxiously in place and said that, of course, it was necessary to find something so important, and warn in advance, and in the end, he apologized. At the same time, the girl remembered her mother's words. She told him that if she missed her, she should just open the box, and she would be with her instead of her mother. She immediately remembered that Wiener had put something in his sleeve when talking about the code. And finding the note, she thought that she would definitely return the box somehow. Having already returned to the palace, she lay on the bed, putting her hand to her forehead. And then she opened the note to read it. All the words of the coffee shop manager literally meant that the information she needed was hidden under the sleeve, and she should look for it when she was alone. In the note, she read a threat that if she wants to return the box, she must uncover Bentley Winter's secret. The order is not revealed. Otherwise, the safety of everything is not guaranteed, after which the letter burned. Falling back onto the bed, she thought that the job didn't seem particularly safe, and whether she should go, but there was nothing else to do. And in general, why is he forcing her to do these things? She knows Bentley Winter. The box disappeared because of the Duke, but no, it's definitely not the husband's fault. The thief is to blame. Wiener was definitely involved in this, but he didn't steal the box. This can be easily determined by the aroma emanating from him and the box. She believed that this faint smell was directly related to the culprit. But it made no sense to cling to something that wouldn't even answer her. Miranda pulled herself together and thought that she first had to do everything within her power. She would reveal all of Bentley Winter's secrets. When suddenly, the Duke entered his fiery wife's room and asked his darling if she was resting and guiltily offered to talk. They went out onto the balcony, and the husband said he had been too careless about what happened earlier. Myra didn't answer anything. She didn't know. No, said the Duke. His opinion hadn't changed because it was his late mother's thing. Every person determines the value of things differently. All his words were said only because he forgot about it for a moment and apologized. Myra said it was hard for her to get used to him apologizing twice. Then Winter asked why the man had taken her music box. She explained that a pawnbroker had previously taken it as payment. The Duke asked if they still had debts. Of course they closed it, she replied. She simply has no one to suspect. She needs to meet him again to get at least some clue. She must find the box at any cost. That's right, said Duke Winter suddenly. Then we will meet him. The Duchess raised her head in surprise and asked him what he meant. If you investigate something alone, unpleasant rumors can spread. So let's look for your music box together. Let's go to that man together, said Bentley. Auntie has nothing to worry about. Moreover, it will look suspicious if you stray from me in the first week of marriage. The young man explained. At first, there was hope in her eyes, but then she remembered the inscription on the note. And bowing her head, she hesitantly thanked him. Taking an envelope from his jacket, the boy said that he also had something that should cheer up his darling. And that it was an advance. Greedily grabbing the envelope with the money, she, drooling, asked if she could check the amount. And the Duke, smiling, replied, as you wish. Miranda simply trembled with joy and said that people's minds are cunning. A knot that seemed impossible to untie, no matter what. But everything melted like a piece of ice in front of money. If there is one thing that never changes, it is not money. She asked, It seems you liked my gift. The Duke said calmly, Of course, she exclaimed loudly. How could she not like money? Well, said the boy. This is not just an advance. It also includes an apology for the box incident and the servant's disrespect. The young man said he heard that they served her empty soup in the morning and even overturned the table angrily. Well done, that's how it should have been, Myra was stunned. Now the servants are doing what someone outside says, but he won't let it go like that. But she shouldn't hold back either. I don't think we can work together for more than a year, said the Duke. The more you get to know each other, the more dangerous the situation becomes. You must behave more carefully. Even with Jennifer and Leela, Miranda asked. True, even with Jennifer you have to be especially careful, Bentley said. After this conversation, Miranda was thoughtful, looking at the leaves falling from the trees against the backdrop of a yellow sunset. She suddenly asked if she could ask one more thing, and asked why it was forbidden to walk around the palace after 11 at night. The owner of the estate asked why she suddenly became interested in this. His wife sarcastically asked how terrible his secret was. He said there was a ghost in the palace that devoured people. His wife was amazed at how bad he was at lying. The guy asked her if she had read the instructions. It was true, and it wasn't very pleasant to mess with him every night. Getting up from the table, he advised staying away from this. No similar story has ever ended well. He took a few steps forward and suddenly stopped, turned around, and said with a smile, "I miss my beloved very much." Miranda got up after him, but also stopped when her husband said this, and also suggested they go inside. Otherwise, the wind would be chilly. Later that night, the men in the mansion were discussing the inattention and forgetfulness of one of them. That he almost buried them, and what could he do? It's already 11, you can't even go out. His friend said to pray they don't get caught, but he's already getting goosebumps. It's time for this red-eyed monster that came from hell to come out. Curiously, one suddenly asked what had happened to those who had seen this creature at least once. The friend replied that he had heard that the Duke executed everyone with his own hands. Yes, this monster eats people, so you don't have to worry about the named guests. But at the same time, one of the maids came out of her room and looked around. She walked down the long corridor of the mansion. The sound of heels and her loud heartbeat could be heard, when suddenly the fire went out. The girl's eyes widened, and she froze in horror. "Stop." Suddenly, someone's inhuman and creepy voice was heard. He ordered Stacy not to turn around. A blood-red eye illuminated the back of her head. Horrified, she covered her mouth with her hands, realizing it was the owner's voice. He was asking her why she wasn't in her room at that hour. The distorted, cold, and creepy voice of the Duke said that he knew she had recently broken a rule. The girl had put something in her mouth. He said that depending on the answer, the punishment would be different, but the next moment the girl bit the contents of the bottle. And she fell dead on the floor. The boy just exhaled heavily. A few hours earlier, Leela asked the maid if they were being threatened. She said yes, that they were ordered to constantly abuse her mistress. Stacy lowered her head and said that her family members were being held hostage. That there was no point in resisting. The head housekeeper asked if the others were threatened and who had given such an order. Bowing her head and body even lower, the maid said sadly that she didn't know she shouldn't post this. Leela told Stacy that the situation was very difficult, but that such behavior was unacceptable. That continuing in the same spirit would not get away with a simple reprimand. The girl told Layla that she understood, but mentally felt very sorry, because nothing could be more valuable than family. For the sake of her family, she was willing to sacrifice her life. At the same time, Jennifer was walking down the corridor. Seeing the light, she looked inside and asked who could be in the dining room at such a late hour, and saw the head maid. "It's almost 11, Jennifer remembered, and the girl said the floor didn't seem clean enough. So she decided to mop one more time. She said that some of the maids had been lethargic lately, and the Duke's assistant asked her if she knew why they had treated the Duchess that way. "Do you understand?" She said. "That this cannot continue like this." Then Linda asked to be allowed to take responsibility for the servants' inappropriate behavior. At the same time, Stacy grabbed the bottle in her hands and repeated the words she had said in her head. "If you get caught, kill yourself. There is no turning back. The Duke will find out anyway. But first, he needs to know her secret." The next morning, Jennifer talked about her dialogue yesterday and explained that, therefore, starting today, Leela is her personal maid. "My personal maid?" Miranda asked, surprised. "That's right," was the answer. "How is this possible, the head maid?" she asked. The husband replied that this had never happened in his practice, but she herself was not against it. And this is the most important thing. The head of the maids thanked him for his trust and told him confidently that she would no longer allow disrespect towards her. The Duchess asked with a laugh. "That's why Leona checked every dish." "That's right, this is also on my list of duties." Leela replied. "I can trust you." "Take care of me, Layla," said Miranda, smiling cheerfully. The boy looked at his wife with interest. As the Duchess said, if you think about it, the maid who ordered her to kill herself for a mistake hasn't been seen all day today. She continued looking around and asked if she had been demoted. Everyone present was surprised by such attention. Only one head housekeeper shuddered and asked the lady if she was talking about Stacy. Miranda abused her ear and then, after a short pause, Leela said that she had disappeared yesterday. How did she disappear? She wasn't even in the room, the lady asked them. Her maid explained to them that they hadn't seen her since yesterday. That's why I asked you to refrain from using your acting skills, Duke Winter suddenly said. Apparently, my darling scared her so much when she knocked over the table that she fled from the guard, Bentley said. Miranda didn't understand what he meant at first, and then, pretending to be a typical Northern Duke, said that he should have treated her normally right away. Then she wouldn't have resorted to extreme measures. The Duke supported her with a wave of his hand, and his wife told him it was better not to anger her. Fear the heavenly punishment and do your job well. Bentley was amused by the phrase heavenly punishment. He smiled, squinted his eyes, and said that was enough. His wife looked at him surprised and worried, not understanding what made him laugh so much, and what those words meant. When they went out into the courtyard, the Duke explained to his wife that Stacy said she wanted to rest. So, what was the point of this drama? Myra asked. Those rumors wouldn't be superfluous, Winter replied. The maid who fearlessly harassed the Duchess disappeared silently. Do you think anyone will bother her after something like this? She asked. The girl didn't think it would spread. Yes, and Leela will keep her mouth shut, but not, Bentley replied. He asked Jennifer to talk about it. Anyway, there's no need to worry about Stacy. No matter what he does, he won't hurt her. No one asked what he was going to do, but if it was something dangerous, he should stir things up a bit. And look at the dependency. At first, she thought there was a secret warehouse there, but it seems that going there is forbidden for another reason. She needs to find out. Stacy's disappearance, the harassment of the servants, a separate building that is forbidden to enter. The palace prohibitions, all truths are always the same. No, we won't enter this building. Duke Winter overcame her thought process. And asks, Myra, he said she didn't say anything. Her husband explained that she had it written all over her face, that she would go crazy if she didn't go in. Maybe Stacy was also caught by a ghost, she asked. You don't believe me at all, darling, said the Duke. He said she was fine. The next moment, he turned around and said, Okay, your trust in me doesn't matter. But he really missed her, so Bentley asked her to moderate her curiosity. The girl frowned. But she said she understood. Winter praised her. Maybe she can convince him and get permission to enter. The girl nodded mentally. He won't give her any permission. She'll have to sneak in there later. Suddenly, both newlyweds instantly raised their heads when they heard a familiar voice, asking how they both were on the street. This familiar voice turned out to be their close friend Louis, who cheerfully waved his hand at them. How are you, Miranda? He asked. Everything is fine. While answering the Duchess, they chatted, leaving the Duke behind. Suddenly, Louis turned his gaze to his friend and noticed how distant he was to the side. And smiling, he asked the Duke how things were going. Miranda shuddered with discomfort. She thought that at the wedding, the atmosphere between them was not the most tender. What should she do? How could they keep meeting? But contrary to all her expectations, her husband smiled and shook hands with his boss. And told him that everything was very good, thank God, he replied. Everything turned out normal, what a relief, although there was no need to adapt to his gloomy mood. However, this handshake was very strange and prolonged. She introduced them as friends of companions from a cheap novel. And while his adoptive brother asked him if he was eating well, and her husband asked him why he should ask, she wondered if they were overdoing it. This was the secret conversation between two friends, both shaking their hands very tightly, and without expressing the slightest negative emotion on their faces. After this, the Duke asked Louis why he had come, and the guild leader replied that it was important for him to convey an urgent message to them. He explained that after their wedding, there was a rumor that a love triangle had formed between the three of them, possibly because he and Miranda talked a lot. The girl asked loudly who the arrows were aimed at. Louis explained that they were aimed from them towards her. What a relief. He said. The servants pricked up their ears. What relief? What should they do? The Duke asked, and then the guild leader. He suggested starting a rumor about his cousin's marriage, so everyone would immediately forget about that misunderstanding. Cousin Miranda asked, surprised. She was discouraged by such a sudden proposal. Louis, noticing the expression on her face, asked if she liked it. She thought it was too much. Everything is fine, Miranda replied, smiling. It's hard to even call this blatant deception. It's a good lie. She asked her brother to take care of her. The boy replied cheerfully to his sister. Winter said sadly, if they had behaved well from the beginning, this wouldn't have happened. Suddenly, Louis also became sad and told his friend that he should also be more careful. And he hoped that Miranda would not suffer from stupid rumors. Duke Bentley was a little surprised by such impudence and, looking at his good friend, thanked him for the advice. What are you whispering about, Miranda? Miranda worried, watching the boy's behavior, when suddenly the Duke was called. The rabbit approached and, apologizing for the disturbance during the break, said he urgently needed to give her something. Long time no see, Jennifer smiled and waved her hand, said the Duchess. Yes, the Lady Miranda replied sadly and turned abruptly, rolling her eyes. God, my dear Duke, said the new and irritated wife, it seems our Bentley doesn't like something. Running into Winter's arms, in tears, she communicated with the imaginary fetus. And she told him how painful it was for him to look at the wrinkles on this beautiful face. And she told Jennifer that this couldn't be done, that something had to be done about it. I understand, said the assistant indignantly, and saying that it was time for the Duke to be taken away. Well, get lost, shouted Myra indignantly. I don't like you either. But suddenly she turned abruptly and said irritably that he had also left a guest. And he didn't even know where the guest rooms were. The boy said everything was fine, that he had already finished with important matters. But he had one request left, but it's better not to say it here and not for unnecessary ears to hear it. And the servants just abused their ears. Miranda said she understood, and so he, smiling, told her to follow him, he would guide her. The girl was puzzled, how did he know the way? Duke Winter, who hadn't gone far yet, sighed and told Jennifer that they had a guest, for which they had to see him off first. But the next moment, he saw his friend and his wife talking sweetly and happily together. He opened his mouth in surprise, but a knot seemed to get stuck in his throat, and he felt a little uncomfortable. They returned to the office, and he checked the papers and asked if that was all the information about Stacy. And Jennifer replied that she was probably responsible for her brothers, sisters, and elderly parents. The neighbors said that she loved her family very much. Bentley, thoughtfully, concluded that recently the whole family had disappeared somewhere. Maybe it was a night escape, he asked. Unlikely, the rabbit replied. They had no debts. Relations with neighbors were good, and the house was well organized. The man clasped his hands at the height of his mouth and lowered his head, sadly concluding that someone might have used them to use Stacy. By the way, he suddenly said, you have also relaxed lately. He was talking about what happened in the garden. Seeing off guests is your duty. And asking about Miranda, who was only here for 3 days, he asked, lowering his ears. Jennifer said that the man looked like a kind Labrador and that everything was probably fine. The Duke got up from the table and said that he knew she was embarrassed with Miranda, but that it was her job. The girl apologized, and Bentley reminded her that she, Miranda, was his wife. And leaving the office, he expressed that such an attitude towards the Duchess was unacceptable. Jennifer said she would be more attentive. After this conversation, the Duke left, slamming the door, and the girl wondered if he really liked Miranda. But they seemed to have married under a contract. They both thought they had the same interests, a relationship based on rationality. Without unstable emotions, but if he really liked Miranda. If he really wants to trust her then, but she pushed these thoughts away from herself. And she thought they would get along. And if you think about it, there are also quite a few advantages. She is cheerful, loud, noisy, sassy. The girl thought about it. Suddenly, a girl sitting in the living room felt an itch in her ear and wondered if someone was saying bad things about her. So what happened? Louis asked. Maybe he knows the prohibitions of this palace, said the Duchess. That's why he's talking about the curfew. The young man understood, and said that several years ago he was asked to conduct an investigation. So Miranda asked, "Do you know anything interesting?" The guild leader said he refused because it was too dangerous, and if he were offered it now, he would also refuse. Looking at his employee, he said that he knew almost nothing about the Duke's secrets, but that she could not delve into them. No one could guarantee her safety in this situation. If you wanted to ask about this, he refuses. Our guild does not deal with such dangerous matters, Louis told his friend. You are right, she said. But why did she ask about this? The boy asked. Miranda looked away and remembered the words from the note. And after that, she said excitedly that it was nothing, just curiosity. Then he can give her another task. Any whim for his money, the former boss replied. He said that they were talking about a certain aroma. Sweetish, reminiscent of the smell of roses. Even from a distance, it feels persistent and strong, no details in general. Okay, I'll do it, Louis said. Tomorrow I will go to the most popular perfumeries, he thanked his friend. The guild leader said it was touching to hear from her. Well, Miranda, remembering that, said loudly that she had something else. She directed her gaze straight into Louis's eyes and asked him in a serious and cautious tone what kind of relationship he had with the Duke. This is not like him, Bentley thought. Jennifer is overdoing it a bit. She is being too harsh with Miranda. Although she herself was not very polite to her assistant, he thought he couldn't resist. Something else was bothering him. At that very moment, Miranda looked at him seriously and asked him in a cautious tone what his relationship with the Duke was. What kind of questions are these? Louis asked, surprised. He said they have a normal relationship between the guild leader and the fake husband of his employee. The boy asked why she was suddenly asking. The girl said that he knew the place too well and that they often whispered without her. Louis sighed in surprise and asked if this bothered her. The girl nodded and said a little. What a relief, said the guild master. It also saddens him to see her with the Duke. Miranda raised her eyebrows in surprise and widened her eyes. Her sense of espionage told her that Louis's distress was of a different nature. Louis, thought the Duchess, she knew, loved the Duke. The boy looked away, embarrassed. And his face turned red. She thought, since when did they have a relationship? What should she do? Does he want to support her? But let it be fake. As the boy said, even despite this pain, he feels relief. Which makes him happy and sad at the same time. Miranda asked him if he felt anything for her. The young man asked his friend why he hated her. They were still good friends. Relying on her wild imagination, she couldn't believe it. I think it's better for you to meet someone who will be with you for a while, Louis said. That same evening, Patrick left the establishment where Myra was going with a hangover. When suddenly, he heard a strange human howl not far from him and turned around. Mr. Louis sat dejectedly on the bench and held his head, wondering why he was doing this would be a burden to Miranda. The boy approached and asked him what he was doing here. He didn't go to see Miranda. He replied that he had already returned. What happened? Patrick asked his teacher. He looks very dejected. Louis didn't say anything special. And remembering the expression on his face, he realized again that he was confused. I was worried, and if he said he no longer wanted to be friends, it was worth following Betty's advice. And be more careful. But seeing them together, he seems to lose control of his own words and actions. However, he told his worker that he, like any child, also wants to have his own corner. Louis clenched his fists and told himself that he must come to his senses. So as not to feel it, he couldn't stop working. He told his employee that they needed to investigate a little starting tomorrow, that they should look for nearby perfume shops. The boy said he would be busy with paperwork, but the employer said he would do it in his free time. Then Patrick asked him if he was abusing his power. They lay hugging in bed, and the Duke asked her what she was talking about with the main guild. The girl said it was about life. Bentley said it would be better if she spent time with him. And after thinking about his friend's unrequited feelings, she asked Winter why he patted her shoulder from time to time. The boy said that this is a way to relax the body and mind. Obviously, it's time for someone to sleep, said Miranda, laughing. And then she asked her husband if he wanted to tell her what he did at night. The Duke, closing his eyes, categorically said he didn't want to, the Duchess approached. And putting her hand on his neck, she asked, "Still?" Bentley Winter was very surprised by this act and asked her if this was her best seduction technique. Miranda blushed. Pouting her lips, she said that he didn't even tremble at such closeness. Betty asks, but she wants him to tremble. He told Dear that if he really fell in love with her. He stopped patting her back. And instantly patted her a couple more times and said nothing. "It's time to sleep, hey, let's finish," asked the wife. But their rooms began to stay together. She thought that sleeping here was definitely more pleasant than anywhere else. But today, she wanted to conduct an investigation instead of sleeping. Miranda thought before her eyes closed completely that so much time had passed. Feeling someone's warmth in bed somehow reminded her of her mother. But then she fell asleep, and her thoughts immediately transported her to a dream, where she found herself in a dense, green forest. The girl didn't understand where she was and started calling, first Mom, then Dad. When suddenly, a voice behind her greeted her. This black silhouette of a small man, the size of a child, hugged Miranda from behind. She asked him who he was and what this place was. The black silhouette whispered in her ear that he wouldn't drop anything anyway, and asked her to just remember something so that, no matter what happened, she wouldn't escape. The next moment, she abruptly opened her eyes. The sunlight blinded her. And sleeping, she realized and thought that it had become cold. After checking the nearby area, she realized that the Duke had woken up earlier. And he had gotten up. She thought she would stay awake all night, when suddenly Bentley asked his darling how she slept. Miranda abruptly got up, called her husband a pervert, and asked if he was here. The guy repeated his words and asked if the first thing he did was check if she was in bed. "No, come on," she said, puffing out her cheeks and asking. "There's nothing to do. Why is he home at this hour?" Sighing deeply, Bentley said that a guest would come in the evening, a very annoying person. And he told her to be prepared because he was a representative of the Senate. That night, Duchess Miranda's face of horror, shock, and stupefaction as she looked out the window was a sight to behold. A man was welcomed at the palace threshold, standing under an umbrella and smiling at him. Miranda simply couldn't believe that her father-in-law was the pawnbroker. And the woman next to him, who looked at her in surprise from the window, meant that she was her mother-in-law. It was hard to understand all this. "Of course, this is a fictitious marriage," said the Senate member, Marquis Dudley. He couldn't believe that Bentley Winter, who always rejected women, suddenly became an affectionate husband. It was too unnatural. Others agreed with him. They believed that the Duke was marrying to avoid external pressure, which means he should be held accountable for undermining the Senate's reputation. "We must not forget the restrictions on changing the Duke's successor. We must ensure that the marriage is fictitious," said another. The men agreed. But they wondered how he would do it. Why don't they talk to the Duke personally? And if it would work. Suddenly, a dark-skinned man stood up from the table and placing his hands on the table. He asked for it to be given to him. The winner argued that he, unlike them, was free. Someone said he was really fit for this business, and the boy asked about the objections. There was no answer, and he nodded his head and said that silence is a sign of agreement. Well, then he declines. When suddenly, one of the senators asked Dudley if this mysterious man could be trusted. He said there was no other way out, that they couldn't control him. Someone asked why they decided to use him as an agent in the first place. Dudley replied that it was because the Duke's grandfather was his guardian. It was raining. Miranda, who decided to have tea, invited Leela to stay with her. And she asked her if she had time. The maid said she would only answer what she could. Myra asked if there was anything she couldn't tell. Leela said it was a palace secret or a prohibition from the Duke. The Duchess clicked her tongue. The girl asked if she herself wasn't curious about what secrets this place was hiding. The maid replied that if she stuck her nose where it didn't belong, she wouldn't be here. Just like the missing servants. This surprised Miranda. She couldn't believe Leela had said that, although she knew the servants didn't have the most flattering opinion of the Duke. They consider him heartless, cold-blooded, ready at any moment to get rid of even the most peaceful servants, and incapable of understanding. But he has another side. On a rainy day, she tilted her umbrella so much that her shoulders got wet. He always does this, Miranda wondered to herself, and with a sigh, she realized that now even the rain reminded her of the Duke. She thinks this way when she looks at anyone with an umbrella. But this person is definitely beyond the reach of possible ideas. The girl's face showed despair, incomprehension, and horror. She even opened her mouth in surprise. And the hand holding the cup trembled. She thought Winter had forgotten here. If Bentley Winter really owed her something, she thought, if he really married a swindler. When Leela said it seemed like Senate guests were coming, she needed to go out to greet them. The Duchess remembered that her husband had mentioned it. But she couldn't even imagine that this idiot was her father-in-law. He introduced himself to the aristocrats and presented himself as Venner of the Senate. The couple was losing their minds, and Myra asked, "This brat is his father. What a rich imagination you have." Bentley pointed. "But then why did he come as a senator?" The wife asked. Duke Winter was cautious and told his wife that he also wanted to ask what such a hooligan was doing in the Senate. The boy who arrived laughed and replied that he had been attending meetings on behalf of his grandfather for a long time. Miranda was very cautious and frowned as she looked at the moneylender she knew. Winner is this man, a moneylender, but also a coffee shop owner, and now also representative of the Solid family. But who is he really? She thought. How then did Duke Bentley rescue her from her thoughts, calling Dearie to come closer? Cautious and suspicious, he looked at his wife and asked if she had called him. The girl was indignant and asked loudly why he needed this. "Who knows?" The Duke replied in a whisper. "He knows about your music box." Maybe she wanted to talk to him about it. When suddenly she, looking directly into her husband's eyes, said firmly that he told her they would figure it out together. The boy's eyes widened. He watched his wife with surprise and interest as she asked him for help. Maybe he thought she had already forgot. The next moment, he turned the young man's head towards the uninvited guest and offered to simply interrogate him. Since he had come to them himself. As Wenner said here, the two get along very well. This is encouraging, they look like real spouses. The spouses looked at the fool arrogantly, and the Duke, disgusted, asked what other spouses they should be. Imaginary or something. The Duke ordered enough nonsense and asked why he was here. The moneylender was stunned and reported that the Senate was very concerned about their marriage. He handed Bentley Winter a sheet of paper and reported that he had been entrusted with the task of helping them. After that, he smiled and said with cunning eyes that this was why he would live in the Duke's residence for a while. Miranda was stunned by shock and indignation, without understanding what was happening to the married couple. The Duke only frowned in disgust, leaving the soap with him, and then the girl shouted if he was going to live here. He turned to the princess and asked what was going on. He was joking. "I'm afraid it's true, dear," said the husband, holding his head. "What to do now?" Miranda asked her husband, and he said damned that he first had to call Jennifer. The woman who started this mess ordered him to find out if they were really married and if there were feelings. Act according to her specialty and destroy everything. She said to seduce one of them or something else, to separate them at any cost. The boy thought that, of course, he was self-confident, but it would be interesting to see. At the same moment, Myra shook her husband by the shoulders and threateningly reminded him that he told her she wouldn't have to live with his family after the wedding. Bentley asked if he couldn't let it go and then started shouting. Benner explained that this was a decision of the Senate and they couldn't change it. And he asked to be shown the room where he could stay. Miranda asked if she really couldn't forbid him from staying here. "He is the boss here," Bentley, irritated. He explained that everything is different with the Senate. If he controlled him, this man wouldn't be here. Then Benner approached the Duchess and, taking her hand, told her, "It seems you are not happy to see him." How annoying. And he asked her if the last time wasn't fun. Miranda gasped in surprise and asked him what he was doing now and turned her gaze to R. But her reaction was not long in coming. Her eyes filled with anger, and with cold rage, she said, placing her hand on her wife's hand that was crossing the line. "She is a princess." Miranda suddenly called her husband and looked first at him and then at the moneylender, who said surprised that he was just greeting. But Bentley had a different opinion and said that the Senate was breaking the bottom. This was already an insult to him and his wife. Wenner said that was not what he meant at all and apologized. Bentley squeezed his wife's hand and said that this was some kind of insincere apology, and ordered him to repeat it. Myra mentally told him to calm down, because he himself told her that she should be careful with the Senate. This would not end well, and the next moment she called the princess and kissed him. Benner, who was still present here and watching the events from the front rows, was stunned and wondered if his presence embarrassed them. She grabbed her husband's chin and told her princess not to worry, that she didn't need anyone but him. Therefore, there is nothing to be jealous of, she said, drawing out every syllable and word, tenderly embracing her husband. That he was simply discouraged. At the same time, Wenner also felt uncomfortable, flinched in fear, and stuttering. And with a trembling voice, he asked for forgiveness and said he was glad to see his friend after a long time. "But I'm not happy at all," said the Duchess indignantly and asked, "Please don't bother my princess." Here the Duke said he understood the Senate's intentions, that they would assign him a room, but that there were several rules that must be followed while he was in the palace. Firstly, this is, you cannot leave the room after 11 at night. The Senate guy asked what would happen if he left. "Who knows?" Bentley replied, "If something happens, they are not responsible for it." The guy said he wasn't going to do anything. He was just curious why such a ban occurred. And after listing the remaining 2 points to the guest, he said that all questions to the Duchess should first be discussed with him. "If he is rude again, I won't let it go," Duke Winter warned the man. "I'll keep that in mind." He replied, "What's wrong with him?" Miranda thought, surprised, he seemed much more sensitive than usual, and she asked if he was tired. After that, Venus was escorted to the room and thanked the lady with glasses. Leela ignored him completely. "How indifferent," she said as she collapsed on the bed, and that she already missed the smell of Sean's coffee. When suddenly, she remembered that she asked that lady if she had taken that music box. The girl asked, "Miranda visited this place." "Yes," she replied, and became very sad. She said it wouldn't be easy for her to get close to her. The redhead said this was a big problem. If she hadn't returned the box, this wouldn't have happened. The boy shuddered. The smile didn't leave his face even after the accusations, and he said he did everything he could when suddenly a teacup flew at him. A rather deep scratch remained on his face, and blood began to flow from it. When the woman approached him, and he flinched again when she asked him if he was tired of working for her. "You've grown a lot," she said. A tramp who had nowhere to go became a coffee shop owner. Lately, business has been booming, spreading by word of mouth. She threw the boy onto the sofa behind her. She climbed on top and said she was very proud to have raised him once. She, smearing the blood, asked him what he was going to do next. Maybe he was thinking about independence. "How about this? Because everyone will wonder who this handsome coffee shop owner is." She was crazy. Could she tell everyone about her past? Which option is more fun? She asked with wide eyes, but her smile never disappeared. Then she narrowed her eyes slightly and said that she would sneak into the Duke's house and live there for a while with the Duke's couple. "What do you think?" she asked Isabella. The girl smiled with satisfaction and told her employee that it was very easy to annoy him. And then she lay down on the bed and thought about Miranda Avina and Duke Bentley Winter. Their relationship was much stronger than she thought. However, they look more like friends or siblings. It seems they are just pretending to be spouses. There is nothing strange about their situation in a contract marriage, and she thought she would report it. And she wouldn't have to seduce anyone. The only problem was that she had no solid evidence, so she had to do everything she could. Heavy rain was falling outside the window. Only its noise was heard on the estate. Lightning flashed, occasionally thunder rumbled. A quiet night. A professional spy always knows when it's time to act on their own. She cannot hesitate, she will not sleep a wink that night. It was necessary to wait until the Duke fell asleep. If Oa was nearby, it wouldn't take long. Bentley entered the room and asked Dearie if she was sleeping. He sat on the edge and said that she was sleeping so soundly that she could answer clearly. And then he suggested that the princess keep her distance today. He asked her why. "No need to pretend to be a couple when they are alone." "It's not that hard," Bentley said. "And this is her bed." "It's hard," she replied firmly. Today there were already many tedious things to do. The boy looked at the window again and said he understood her. She turned around, and after a while, she asked him why he was still sitting motionless. The young man explained that he needed to make sure she fell asleep and thought. After spending some time in a quiet room, listening to the sound of the rain, he began to speak. Myra pricked up her ears. Slightly turning his head towards her, he asked if it was necessary to kiss him. Miranda's eyes widened. She was quite surprised by such a question and realizing a little of what she had just heard. She was dumbfounded. She suddenly got out of bed, raised an eyebrow, and asked the Duke what he was talking about, since he himself was kissing her, as if she were being foolish. That's right, the boy said. As she herself noticed, she was a little tired, her nerves were on edge, Miranda said noticeably. She lay back down on the bed, turning towards the wall and covering herself with a blanket, and said that when she is tired, this is absolutely normal. A person cannot be perfect forever. Then Bentley decided to say that this had actually happened before. He called his father at a Senate meeting, and then was not lightly condemned. Then the successor to the current Duke said that he didn't even know the basic rules of behavior. What a rude person, Myra said. And indeed, Bentley nodded, smiling. But the funny thing is that, for such an insignificant imperfection, they are simply willing to devour him. And for serious achievements, he doesn't even receive banal praise. Because this is a fact. Because he is a soldier. He said that he must be a perfect person without a single flaw. And no one has ever told me the words you said. The Duke admitted. He told her something, he didn't want to disturb her sleep, the boy said sadly. Everything is fine, Miranda replied, but she is about to fall asleep. The girl settled down in bed, ready to sleep, and Bentley Winter turned over and looked at his wife's back. His hand suddenly reached out to his Duchess, but he stopped in time, slightly squeezing his fingers. And he wished his dearie good night. It was almost 11 now, but at that moment Jennifer was still sitting at her desk. She already had bruises under her eyes from fatigue and lack of sleep. They were already sticking together. When a friend of someone put a cup in front of her, and she flinched. It was the head maid. Leela asked the master's assistant if she was still here and reminded her of the time. That's the point, said the rabbit. It's about Mr. Venner's visit. A conflict has broken out between the Duke and the Senate. Anyway, don't delay, Leela said. The girl thanked her for her concern and asked what brought her here. It seems she is not here just because she is worried about her. The maid asked her if she had forgotten already, but she herself asked her to understand what the Duchess was trying to achieve. Did you find anything strange? Jennifer asked. The maid said she would like to ask something first. The head cleaner asked the master's assistant a direct question about what happened to Stacy. The Duke's assistant almost jumped out of her chair at the unexpected question, but she didn't answer. I'm sorry, Leela said. Please, she asked. Pretend you didn't hear me. The girl said uncertainly that they could understand her. She takes care of all the maids and Stacy too. She lowered her hand and said she trusted her. Jennifer didn't seem to be hiding anything, and it was true. She sincerely said there was nothing to worry about. She didn't know much, but she could say one thing with confidence: the Duke also cares about her. He may seem tough and scary, but Bentley Winter will not harm his people. He, above all, does not take irrational measures. She knew she didn't seem particularly reliable, but she had worked as his secretary for a long time. And she could be sure of it. Layla thanked her, although not much, her heart felt lighter. Precise. The girl apologized. Well, as for Mrs. Miranda, the head cleaner began to speak. Exactly, Jennifer said and asked if there was anything strange. No, nothing. In a moment, Leela said quite calmly. The rabbit was indignant and asked her if she hadn't come to tell her something. No, the maid replied. She just threw bait at him. Jennifer felt somewhat offended by this fact, but Leela asked her not to worry about it. That if something happened, she would report it. Literally immediately after the end of the dialogue, it was barely 11 o'clock. Miranda opened the door to the street, but immediately closed the door and thought that a professional spy always knows when it's time to act. But the rain was too heavy. Whatever happens, she thought, armed with an umbrella she found nearby. It's not easy for her to get up after 11. Miranda, stepping out onto the street, thought that Bentley Winters, no, she must not miss this opportunity. Forward, towards the outbuilding. Although the umbrella broke due to the wind, she was happy about it once she got there. All that was left was to get in somehow. Placing the umbrella nearby, she began to look around. The door, of course, was locked. The only way out was to open the window. And after examining the building and the nearby windows, she realized that the window was open. And she wondered if that would be an advantage. She couldn't leave. It was obvious that something dangerous was happening, as if her own body was warning her that this would not end well. Miranda thought that if she were the heroine of some thriller, then all readers would hate her. And a door at the same time. This is dangerous. Not for nothing did they say that some kind of evil spirits live here who are in trouble. They can't even use magic. They need to go back. Although she knew it, she thought maybe they just wanted to scare her, but there was definitely something here. She entered the lit room, directly from where the light illuminated the previous corridors. And she saw a girl. The redhead was lying on the bed. Miranda's eyes widened when she realized it was Stacy. Suddenly, behind her, a cold but chillingly familiar voice was heard, which asked, "I told you how much I missed you, dear." The Duke grabbed her by the shoulder. "It would be good," he said thoughtfully, when she was already unconscious, "if you listened to my advice." He took out a pink bottle and poured the contents into the IV and put the tube in Stacy's mouth. Even before she had time to ask anything, she consumed the poison of her own free will. She was an honest servant who did her job silently. Her action cannot be attributed to arbitrariness. She must have received an order she couldn't disobey. Perhaps it was the same one that forced her to harass Miranda. But why does she want to know my secret so much? Bentley thought, looking at his wife, who was sleeping peacefully in the nest. Seeing her snoring loudly, the young man realized that she certainly couldn't be called an angel. But she slept well. Is it better for us to keep our distance for at least one day? He remembered his wife's words, and even then thought it was a good excuse. Even at that moment, he realized that she was going there today. He was very glad he had hung a bell on her. In general, he recently learned two things. The first is that his magic does not work on Miranda Avina. Take sleep magic as an example. If you time it, everyone usually falls asleep. You just need to activate the spell. But with Miranda, everything is very different. Even with a short distance, the spell took a long time to work. Because of this, he had to stay close to put Miranda to sleep, but she just kept her distance. Looking at his wife, who was already seeing the 10th dream, he thought he no longer knew if she was smart. Or not. Second, she has something to do with him. Miranda ignored the warnings more than once. Her intentions do not seem evil. Perhaps that's why he decided to help Miranda get in. He thought about warning her properly. But he wanted to know why she was so interested in his secrets. "You have also been told so many times not to do this," he said and asked. She also received some kind of order, yes, she said in dreams. For a moment, he was very scared by the sounds that she had stopped breathing. But when he heard a good loud snore, he exhaled in relief. At the same time, he thought and remembered what he told his father, "Betty, don't forget. You can't trust anyone." He was worried about how easily she opened up to people. The boy asked his father. He didn't trust his mother either. The man asked, surprised, if he was asking about his mother. Betty nodded. He didn't trust her, he said coldly. The boy's eyes widened. He tried not to trust her, but for some reason he wanted to. Maybe she was the kind of person with whom you could share your life. Someone you wanted to trust without fear of betrayal. Then the baby was very surprised by his father's words. He still didn't understand his true meaning, but the man kept smiling. And then he said that someday he would have that person, and looked at his peacefully sleeping wife. He was thinking what to do with this troublemaker. He couldn't force her to sleep in a chair. It was almost midnight. There was no other option. In the morning, Miranda barely opened her eyes, as if she didn't want to leave the happy moments of sleep behind. She thought it was so hot. It turns out the Duke was so gentle, when suddenly she opened her eyes and, as if seeing a corpse. She screamed loudly. "Did you sleep enough?" asked the Duke. Not everyone can scream like that in the morning. The girl was even more horrified when she saw her husband and screamed again. Out of fear and fright, she couldn't even utter her own husband's name. And she, smiling, asked where he was taking the princess. Now the Duchess realized what happened yesterday. Not only did he scare her by approaching from behind, but he also put her to sleep. And maybe he knocked her unconscious. Miranda, feeling her face, moved away from Bentley and thought, Leona died, this is heaven. Winter told her not to worry, that she was still alive. Approaching, he, shining like an angel, asked her where she thought he was going to send her. The girl shuddered and thought it sounded scary. She, frowning and narrowing her eyes, asked her husband what was wrong with Stacy. And she herself thought that she was still warm, which means she was alive. Bentley told Miranda that Stacy also violated the ban. That's why she met a monster. Stop lying, she shouted loudly. But suddenly, her hired husband interrupted her and coldly told her that she was exactly the same. That she came here by deception. He asked her how many times he had told her to leave the poor outbuilding and why she wanted to come here. Myra shuddered, remembering the note again. She lowered her head and said she was just curious. Duke Bentley Winter paused for a moment to look at his wife and said, "That's how it is." He turned around and called for them to follow him. They needed to have breakfast. He promised to feed his good guest. Miranda wanted to stop the Duke by calling him princess, but she stopped. For some reason, she felt ashamed of her behavior, or maybe distrust towards him. The house was noisy. People were talking, whispering, and playing cards when Myra's father's friend stopped the man and asked him if he was trying to deceive him. "We haven't sat at the same table for a long time," said one gentleman. "I see everything is going very well for you." "Well, let's move on to the main game now," he suggested and asked how things were going with the bets. But Baron Avina suggested stopping. They came here for a housewarming party. It would be better to brighten the evening with a fun game. The aristocrats were surprised by the Baron's behavior, but the next moment they cordially agreed with him. "Baron Avina is so wrong," thought the redhead. "His whole life is a chessboard." The man invited Mrs. Teresa to play with them, but she didn't mind. And raising her head, she accepted the game. Anyway, their games were too simple and boring. Sitting at breakfast, Miranda wondered if the Duke would understand her if she told him the reason. She didn't know, but she knew for sure that after that day, he stopped calling her dearie. But it's annoying and looks ridiculous. It's obvious he's doing it on purpose. Well, that's fine, she thought. This is for the best. Otherwise, she gets goosebumps from this nickname. She won't call him princess anymore. She decided. When suddenly, a Venner approached her and sat next to her, and, noticing how aggressively she was eating, he asked the Duchess if something had happened. Myra said she had no appetite anyway. If he needed to talk to her, he should do it through the Duke. And she got up from the table. The boy said he would love to, but they have been avoiding each other lately, and he needs to convey something. The girl had already called the maids and told them to bring the Duke to her. But she stopped when she saw a note in the moneylender's hand, and he told her it was better to accept it. One of the maids asked if they should bring the Duke. No, she said loudly and ordered him to hunt a peacock. The girls immediately ran out into the street and chasing the bird. They told each other that if they didn't catch it, they would say they knew nothing about it. At the same time, Miranda had already received a secret note from Wenner. It said about the task and that everything was fine with her father at the mansion. She was already incredibly surprised by the new message, and then they also threatened her father. And they looked at the smiling moneylender. At that moment, this constantly smiling, seemingly mocking face angered her greatly. And she grabbed him by the tie and asked what it meant. The young man was so discouraged that the smile disappeared from his face. He said that this was given to him and he has no idea what is written there. Then tell me who sent it. Myra ordered. What a pity, she said she couldn't say anything. Maybe, he said, if she went out with him, the situation would change. Stop talking about this nonsense, she said. Wenner asked if it was too much to call someone's feelings nonsense. You yourself didn't care about other people's feelings, Miranda told him loudly. Since you need something from me, you should at least know what kind of person I am. The Duchess even pointed out that whoever sent this note knows at least something about her. And if he really wants to date her, he should first find out what kind of men she likes. She suddenly, as if disgusted, pulled her hand off his tie, and said that at least that way he would know that she simply hates people who steal her jewelry. Finally, she turned around and said loudly, as much as she could, that she also hated that he was with this thief. And that he pretended to be white and fluffy. Further in the room, a loud stomping was heard on the door, and then the door slammed shut with a roar. Wenner was surprised. Immediately after leaving the moneylender and her husband's mansion, she arrived at her father's house and, opening the doors, she asked loudly if he was home. She asked if everything was all right, if something had happened. The father looked stunned at his daughter, holding a frying pan in her hands, and said that everything was fine. What a relief, she thought. It was even easier for her to breathe when she saw her father in perfect health. Exactly, said the male friend. This is her first time in this mansion, and she asked if he wanted a snack. Myra said that, of course, she had already had breakfast. What a pity, the father said sadly. And he had just prepared her favorite stew. Upon hearing this, Miranda immediately ran to the table. She was happy about her daughter's appetite. If she returned to the annex, she thought, Bentley Winter perhaps wouldn't leave her alone this time. But if Stacy was safe, she thought during dinner with her father, he certainly wouldn't kill her. But you can be sure that the Duke will be very disappointed. But they are only having a fictitious marriage. Why should she care about that? What if he hates me? She thought suddenly, while climbing onto the extendable window, and realized that it was not the time to think. Because her father and the box were worth more. As expected, there seems to be nothing special here, and nothing has changed since her last visit. Suddenly, not far from the window, she saw an unusual door, and she didn't remember if it was there. But still, pulling the doorknob, she entered the room, where she was illuminated by a bright light. And warm. What is this? She thought as she moved forward. Maybe a greenhouse. But that space is not visible from the outside. It turns out to be magical. Moving further and further, she wondered if this was the Duke's secret, when suddenly something from below caught her attention. A child was sleeping in a bed with wooden trestles, wrapped in a soft white blanket. She moved closer, put her hands on her knees to look, and wondered what he was doing here. She was truly lost. This child, Miranda suddenly thought, while looking at the child's face and hair. It seemed as if she had seen him somewhere. When suddenly a creak was heard, making it clear that the child was waking up. The Duchess shuddered. The child was not fully awake yet, but he had already sat up on his knees. And he began to wipe his eyes. But then he noticed something unusual, and raising his head, his eyes met Miranda's. He screamed in horror and fell off the bed with trestles. The child ignored the question about his well-being and immediately became alarmed and asked angrily how he had gotten here. The Duchess was surprised by the impudence of this child they had just met, and he had already addressed her as you. And she had answered him that she had come here on foot. Wait, Miranda activated full brain function. He has silver hair. Purple eyes, a strange déjà vu. And this child also had the same way of speaking. It could be that the Duke's secret is his hidden son. Before his adoption, he lived on the streets of the Empire, remembering nothing of his parents or himself. The cold and hunger of winter were incredibly difficult to endure. But it was even harder to live knowing that you had no one to share the warmth with. She still clearly remembered this pain. It was incredibly difficult for a child to be alone. If the Duke had really locked him up here so that no one would find out. That's why he created the ban, she thought. That's the kind of person he is, Bentley Winter. Why the hell? The boy suddenly asked worriedly. It's not easy for you. The compassionate Duchess suddenly asked pitifully. The boy didn't understand the question at all. But the next moment, he found himself in the warm and soft embrace of his wife, who was hugging him tightly. She put into those hugs those feelings that she had no one to share with when she lived alone. And little Bentley's face turned red. Trying to push away the two-room apartment from her, he, all red, asked what she was doing. Miranda calmly replied that everything was fine, that she was on his side. Hugging the baby again, she said, "Your father is a complete disappointment." She asked how he could keep such a wonderful child locked up. Bentley asked her to wait, but she, pulling the child's cheeks, said that you can't hide from genes. What a beautiful face. And this grimace of irritation looks like a pan punch, she said cheerfully. His face turned red, and she asked his name. Bentley could no longer resist this attack of love from his wife, although he tried to find a normal answer. But he quickly gave in, and separating from Miranda, he blushed and looked away. And he said, "Call me Betty." "Betty?" The Duchess exclaimed loudly. "What a cute name." And with the same enthusiasm, she asked him what he was doing here. "His dad locked him here." The child asked not to misunderstand him, but his father is not like that. "There is a reason for this." Myra thought about the reason. And then Betty said she also had a question for her. She asked if she didn't know that entering the annex was strictly forbidden. Her father told her something similar. He heard that they recently caught a scoundrel trying to get here. It was her. But Myra couldn't answer. And Betty kept asking why she violated the prohibition twice. She mumbled, and he asked if he shouldn't be told that. "Yes," said Miranda, hugging her knees and looking at her husband's son with kind eyes. "There is a reason." "Which one?" the child asked. But when the Duchess stood up, she apologized and said she couldn't reveal the details. And she explained to the silver-haired child that she was doing this for her loved ones. Betty continued to sit on the grass in a lotus position and asked about her father. He was dear to her too. She firmly replied that it was a secret. This question embarrassed Miranda a little, and she said that she, of course, could become her mother's rival. But it's not that simple. The boy looked at his wife with an arrogant look as she said he was still small, that he knew little about adults and was thinking about how to explain it. "Forget it," said Betty, standing up and asking why she wasn't coming back. "What if his father finds out something?" "And it's true," said Myra. "Come on, let's hurry up," she said, putting the bed with easels back in its original place, "and she will keep everything a secret. You are so understanding, not like your father." "I take back my words, little angel," said the girl cordially and friendly. Suddenly, the boy's face and ears turned red, and he told his wife that if she was bored before bed, she could come see her from time to time. "Neither of them," said little Bentley Winter, "he also needs to sleep." Those words really touched the Duchess's heart. The next moment, she picked up the child in her arms, hugged him from behind, and squeezed him tightly against her. And she told him, "It's okay, tell me if it's hard for you alone." When saying goodbye, Miranda waved her hand with a wedding ring and smilingly wished Bate good night. The young man took care of his wife, and as soon as she left the garden, he exhaled deeply. After her adventure, the girl returned to the shared bedroom with a slam. And she discovered that her husband was not there. She thought he was raising a child by locking him in some kind of greenhouse. Such a person did not deserve forgiveness. Although it seems that the child holds no grudge, she concluded, recalling Betty's words. And she began to think about the reason for everything. She went through many options in her head, from the Duke's strange behavior to her own appearance, wondering who her mother was. But then morning came, birds sang outside the window, the sun gradually began to warm up. The Duke woke up all red, rubbing the bridge of his nose with irritation. And frowning, he said, "I haven't even closed my eyes all night. Seriously, silly." In the morning, she returned to her palace and found her wife snoring in her room. He sighed deeply and said that she was sleeping very well after everything that happened last night. He moved Miranda aside and decided to lie down too, and asked her in a whisper if she felt better after learning everything. T remembered what happened. "You can call me Betty," she reminded that child, probably now too. But her eyes closed on their own. "What is this?" Miranda thought when she woke up. It was something familiar, so soft and voluminous, and when she opened her eyes she realized she was touching the Duke's chest. Bentley Winter was surprised by her presence when she arrived and why she put her hand on his chest. But is it true? Miranda thought, looking at her husband's beautiful, sleeping face, is Betty a panpuno? The Duke's secret, which she so diligently extracted, was hidden by the child. That means the wife is also hidden. She drew parallels in her head. But she wondered who it would be. This question kept her busy all night. In any case, if she tells Wenner everything, she will finally have at least a small chance to return the box. All this time, she continued to hold her husband's chest with her hand. When suddenly Bentley woke up, Miranda jumped abruptly out of bed and asked him if he was awake. And why at such a late hour? He said he hadn't slept well. The Duchess asked the Duke why he couldn't sleep. The boy replied that he had a nightmare. This interested the girl, and she asked what kind of nightmare it was. Bentley said that in it, he hugged the guild leader. He thought that Louis was a second father to Betty. Nonsense. At the same moment, Duke Winter had already gotten up and headed towards the entrance. He said, "Sal, you have to eat," and turned around and added, "darling." Miranda was moved by this address. She got goosebumps and a red blush appeared on her face. He called her that again and she told him, "Come on, princess." During the tea party, Layla asked the lady if something had happened. She asked why she thought so. She explained that she had eaten less for several days, and now everything was back to normal. Miranda smiled and said that she and the Duke had quarreled a little. It seems the conflict had already been resolved. "That's right," asked Leela, "and I didn't even notice anything." The Duchess was surprised, but she thought it was for the best. Miranda asked if she could ask her a question and asked, looking out the window at the maids, what they were doing. Leela said that this is the Duke, whom she ordered to be caught yesterday, and now the maids are disciplining him as part of the punishment. She said that this morning they tried to ruin his shoes, which is why they had to use exercise as punishment. There is definitely someone behind this bullying, Miranda thought, and then Eureka. She thought, maybe it's Bentley Winter's wife, or if it's one of the maids. If this is true, she is forced to hide due to the status difference. And a daughter of a fallen aristocrat suddenly appears as his wife. But she is also a victim. Why is he doing this to her? This is fraud. There was no word in the contract about a hidden wife. She asked Leela what she thought about a man who hid his family and married an unknown woman. The head cleaner sighed deeply and said it was pie. Then the author hid the words. "That's right," said Miranda. "Sometimes we cannot avoid certain circumstances." "Everyone has their reasons," said Leela. Understanding the situation of such a person is a waste of time. The Duchess nodded mentally, although she wanted to deny it. No, everything could be a product of your imagination, which is true. You can be sure that you have a child, which is not true. Leela wished the lady a pleasant snack. Holding her head, our heroine wondered why she thinks about that man so often. Bentley Winter, and she simply have a sham marriage. How unexpected. A familiar, flattering voice suddenly said when Myra approached him that you were the first to want to see me. He put a wide smile on his face and smugly asked me if I wanted to ask him out. In response, the girl grunted. I'm sorry," said Wenner. "I understood everything last time, and I won't repeat my mistakes." He enthusiastically said that he would keep trying to seduce her and asked what kind of coffee she liked. What was her personality type? Miranda sighed deeply and said, "I don't think you understand me." To which the moneylender replied that she was much more interesting to him than he expected. He was truly not indifferent to the motives of her concerns and hesitations. "What experience were you talking about?" asked the Duchess. The boy asked if he should try to guess, so that she could convince herself of the sincerity of the words. In a tense and unsettling tone, he asked the girl, "In the first note, you were told to find out the Duke's secret." "No, so you knew from the beginning," said Miranda, frowning. And she explained that she hadn't read the note. It's just that the moneylender also received a similar order from a person who can't wait to uncover this secret. He finally reached the truth after many obstacles. Now all that remains is to transmit the information. "But you doubt." "Yes?" asked Benner. Miranda pursed her lips and frowned angrily, exhaled, and said that he was right. "You will have to choose the Duke's trust or your mother's box, or she can ask him to be the only person to reveal this secret." "You can only choose one," he said, resting the small of his back and elbows on the back of the sofa. As the tension grew. The next moment, she still hesitated, squeezed her hands tightly and said, "Okay." She handed the boy a folded note. "You are revealing a secret, aren't you?" the cafe owner asked the Duchess with a malicious smile. "Great choice, Miranda," he said. The girl was serious and knew exactly what to do next. Looking at the Duchess's back and taking the note, he asked if he could read it. "It's your business," said the girl, getting up from the sofa. From his facial expression when he opened the note, it could be understood that he was surprised. Even the smile disappeared from his face. But the next moment, he began to read aloud, "I found something out. but I can't tell you in a note. We need to meet in person. You have a stolen box. I have information. Wenner read, laughing. Incredibly, she offers him a deal and asks if that means she won't choose a side. No, said Miranda, rolling her eyes and seriously looking at her interlocutor again. She said she would join both, having no intention of becoming a puppet. And betray the Duke. Irritated, she explained that she didn't need his consultations and generally asked, "Were you just parodying me?" And what seemed to have happened, the boy asked cheerfully. Wenner asked since when she took his side. You two haven't known each other for long. Miranda had already approached the door at that moment and put her hand on the handle. Exhaling, she said that when choosing between the Duke and him, she would obviously choose Bentley Winter. But the next moment, a stranger's hand was on her hand. Is everything all right? Asked a man who approached her from behind. You don't know anything about him, surely more than you, said the Duchess. You know, he won't take any more risks, replied the boy. There are many rumors from the other side about other people's money, from the aristocrats. And about Bentley Winter, what do you know? Myra asked, pulling her hand away from the guy. Wenner said he couldn't give details, but because of him, not a single life was destroyed. Among the victims were good people who were not guilty of anything, but he couldn't say more. Myra. She thought he was the only one here from the other side. And she said she wasn't naive enough to believe any fact without proof is just rumors. How do you like that? He asked, smiling cheerfully, and said that the Duke has a secret mistress. The girl shuddered. And I thought this idiot already knew everything, and the moneylender shrugged. And he said he was joking, but that in every joke there is some truth. I'm telling you, you don't know much about your princess, he said, looking thoughtfully to the side. He put his elbow on the door behind Myra, leaned over her, and said that he didn't want the person he liked to get hurt. Miranda thought he was just an ignorant idiot and looking at him from under her forehead. She thanked him for the advice. But you hurt me yourself, said the Duchess, opening the door, but on which he was leaning only past the note. And she is no longer a young lady. Don't you dare call her that, he said threateningly, showing his ring finger with a ring. And he asked to call her whatever she wanted, lady, duchess, madam. And after Miranda had left, he looked at the floor and smiled and said quietly, She still hates me. Finally, leaving the annoying person, she jumped up cheerfully, rejoicing at the solution of a problem. She was sure that this thief was already caught, not in vain. She learned Bentley Winter's secret. When meeting, she pretends to give information, but in reality she will call with all her might. The Duke's secret is no one's business. She will just take her music box and run away. Suddenly, she heard a conversation between passing maids, saying that the Viscount had recently started a big scandal. There was an illegitimate son. When the girl heard this, she covered her ears. She didn't want to hear it and didn't need to know. It doesn't matter, she told herself. You trust Bentley Winter, and he won't reveal his secret. She is not curious to know who Bates' mother is. All this time, while the girl squeezed her eyes shut, and a voice called in her ears. And as she was leaving, a worried Jennifer grabbed Miranda by the neck, lifting her in the air. Are you okay? The excited rabbit asked the lady, and seeing that she didn't understand him. He said about the stairs. The cat said they met again, but she didn't think she would save someone she hated. Who said I hate you? She shouted and said, From now on I will try to treat you better. You are the Duke's wife. The husband's word was warm and so seductive that Myra repeated it and asked Jennifer if she could ask a question. Having received a positive answer, she asked if anyone was particularly close to the princess. The rabbit began to think. And the next moment, her husband's assistant, blushing with embarrassment, asked if she meant her. It can't be, said Miranda, moving away from her. Jennifer said she was ignoring her feelings for the Duke. At the same time, Bentley was sitting in his office in front of his desk writing something. And thinking. Miranda said she had a reason. She violated the prohibition twice and discovered his secret, although it is not clear if she understood it. The man wondered if it might have something to do with the box, but why didn't Miranda consult him? And remembering a friend's words, he thought what he was going to do now with this information. He would give it to someone. He needed to follow how they knocked on the door. Sorry to bother you, Duke, said the maid. Mr. Wenner has come to see you, but before she could finish speaking, the boy entered alone. He apologized for such a sudden disturbance during working hours, but the matter cannot be delayed. Duke Winter frowned and said threateningly that he did not invite him. What a pity. He replied, smiling. I'll get straight to the point. In 2 days, there will be a banquet at Marquis Ronald's house. Your presence with the Duchess is highly desirable, he said, leaning over the table. Getting up from the table, the Duke, irritated, said to convey that they would not be there. Benner asked if he knew the reason why he was here. And with a malicious smile, he told the Duke that he would have to go out, because they were expecting the appearance of a very important person. Who? Bentley asked. And at that very moment Jennifer told Miranda that there was one of those people outside the palace. A friend of the Duke. And so they announced in unison, although they were in different rooms and had different dialogues, that it was the first Empress Elizabeth.